The dust never settled in Black Hollow anymore. It hung in the air like judgment, coating everything. The false front buildings, the dried-up well in the town square, the faces of people who'd stopped pretending things would get better. 3 years without rain had turned the prairie into cracked earth and broken promises. The cattle died first, then the crops, then the hope. Clara Whitlock stood in the back room of Hendrick's General Store, staring at her reflection in a piece of polished tin nailed to the wall. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, hollow-eyed, thinner than she'd been 6 months ago, wearing a dress she'd let out twice already to hide how much weight she'd lost. "You don't have to do this." She turned. Margaret Chen stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. Margaret had been her friend since childhood, back when Black Hollow was still called Promise Valley, back when people actually believed the name meant something. "Yes, I do." Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "The bank's taking the schoolhouse next week. I'm 3 months behind on room and board at Mrs. Talbot's. What else is there?" "You could leave. Take the train east. With what money?" Clara laughed, but it sounded bitter even to her own ears. "I've got $4 to my name, Margaret. That won't get me past the county line." Margaret stepped closer, lowering her voice. "They're calling it a bride lottery, but we both know what it really is. They're selling us like—" "I know what they're doing." Clara cut her off. She didn't need to hear it said aloud. The flyers had gone up 2 weeks ago, printed on expensive paper that someone had paid real money for, probably Mayor Crenshaw, who owned half the town and would own the other half soon enough. "Seeking respectable gentlemen of means. Black Hollow Bride Lottery. A chance at new beginnings. Saturday, October 14th, high noon." The words were dressed up pretty, but the meaning was clear enough. Desperate women, desperate town, desperate measures. $10 bought you a ticket, draw a name, get a wife. No questions asked about where you came from or what you'd done. The town got an influx of cash. The women got, well, that depended on who drew their name. "Ruby Morrison's husband beat her so bad last year she couldn't walk for a week," Margaret whispered. "What if—" "Then I'll deal with it." Clara straightened her spine, forced her shoulders back. "I've dealt with worse." She hadn't, actually, but saying it made her feel like maybe she could. The door crashed open. Vera Colton stumbled in, her face blotchy from crying. She was 19, pretty in that fresh-faced way that wouldn't last long out here. Her father had drunk himself to death 2 months back, leaving her with nothing but debts. "Can't do this," Vera sobbed. I can't. Clara moved without thinking, pulling the girl into her arms. "Breathe, just breathe. They're going to sell us like cattle." Vera's whole body shook. "Like we're nothing." "We're not nothing," Clara said it firmly, trying to convince herself as much as Vera. "We're survivors. Remember that." Outside, a bell rang. 3 chimes. Half an hour until noon. Margaret gripped Clara's hand. "If you need to run, if whoever draws your name is bad, you find me. You understand? We'll figure something out." Clara squeezed back, then let go. Running wouldn't solve anything. It never did. Watch. The town square was packed. Clara hadn't expected that. Men everywhere, dusty cowboys, railroad workers with permanent squints, a couple of suited gentlemen who looked like they'd come from somewhere with actual money. She counted at least 40, maybe 50. All of them clutching little paper tickets, all of them eyeing the 7 women lined up on the platform like horses at auction. Mayor Crenshaw stood front and center, his vest straining over his belly, gold watch chain glinting in the harsh sunlight. He was smiling, actually smiling, like this was some kind of celebration instead of a funeral for dignity. "Gentlemen," his voice boomed across the square, "welcome to Black Hollow. I see we've got quite a turnout. That's good. That's real good. Shows there's still men of action in this world, men willing to take a chance on—" "Get on with it," someone shouted from the crowd. Crenshaw's smile tightened. "Right. Well, let me introduce our lovely ladies," he gestured at the line. "Miss Vera Colton, age 19, Miss Sarah Brennan, 23, Mrs. Ida Fletcher, widow, 31, Miss Clara Whitlock, 27. Clara stopped listening. She focused on a point above the crowd, on the mountains in the distance. The Sangre de Cristos, they called them. Blood of Christ. Appropriate, she thought bitterly. Good Christian women, all of them, looking for honest partnerships with hardworking men. Spare us the sermon! Another voice, rougher. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara's jaw tightened. She wanted to scream at them, wanted to ask how they'd feel if their sisters or daughters were standing here, but she kept her mouth shut and her eyes forward. Now then, Crenshaw produced a wooden bowl. Each man's ticket has a number. Each lady's name is in this bowl. We'll draw fair and square. First name drawn goes to the highest ticket number, and so on. Everyone clear? Murmurs of assent. Clara's stomach churned. Ticket number 47. Crenshaw's hand dipped into the bowl. And the lucky lady is Miss Vera Colton. Vera made a small, broken sound. A man pushed forward, middle-aged, tobacco-stained beard, cruel eyes. He looked her up and down like evaluating livestock. She'll do, he said, and grabbed Vera's arm. Clara watched Vera stumble off the platform, watched her friend disappear into the crowd, and felt something inside her go cold and hard. This was really happening. Ticket 41, Miss Sarah Brennan? Sarah went to a railroad man with scarred knuckles. She didn't cry, just walked toward him with her head high. Clara silently cheered for that small act of defiance. 3 more names, 3 more women gone. Then Crenshaw's hand went into the bowl again. Ticket number? Well now, ticket number 1. First ticket sold. He pulled out a slip of paper. Miss Clara Whitlock. Time seemed to slow down. Clara descended the platform steps, her legs moving on autopilot. Ticket number 1. Who had bought ticket number 1? She scanned the crowd, trying to figure out which man was about to claim her. The crowd parted, and Clara's blood went cold. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that looked like they could carry a full-grown steer. Dark hair, dark eyes, a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so utterly closed off. He wore range clothes, dust-covered and worn, and a gun belt that sat low on his hips with the ease of someone who knew how to use it. But it wasn't his size or his gun that made people step back. It was the way he moved, like a predator, all controlled violence and perfect balance. And it was the silence that followed him, thick and suffocating. Ronan Hale. Even Clara knew that name, though she'd never seen the man before. He lived somewhere up in the canyonlands, beyond the ridges where decent people didn't go. The rumors about him ranged from disturbing to terrifying. He'd killed a man in Denver, he was wanted by the law, he was half crazy from living alone too long. He stopped 3 feet from her and just looked. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and completely unreadable. Mr. Hale? Crenshaw's voice had lost its jovial tone. Didn't expect to see you here. Ronan didn't look at him. He kept his gaze locked on Clara, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The lottery's legal, Ronan said. His voice was low, rough from disuse. I bought a ticket. I drew a name. Well, yes, technically. Then we're done here. Ronan turned, clearly expecting Clara to follow. She didn't move. He stopped, looked back. You coming? Clara found her voice. I don't even know you. You know my name. You know where I live. That's more than these other men gave their acquisitions. He said the word like it tasted bad. That's not exactly reassuring. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or respect. Wasn't meant to be, but I paid my $10 same as everyone else. You want to stand here arguing, or you want to get this over with? Mayor Crenshaw stepped forward, mopping his brow. Now, Miss Whitlock, perhaps we could arrange No. The word came out harder than Clara intended, but she'd made her choice when she put her name in that bowl. And looking around at the other men, at their hungry stares and calculating expressions, she realized that Ronan Hale, dangerous, unknown Ronan Hale, might actually be the least terrible option. At least he hadn't touched her, hadn't leered, hadn't treated her like property, even if that's technically what she was now. Fine, she said. Let's go. She thought she saw surprise flicker across Ronan's face, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. He nodded once, then started walking. Clara followed, very aware of the crowd's eyes on her back, of the whispers starting up. Canyon lands won't last a week. Probably kill her. She kept her head up and kept walking. Ronan's horse was tied at the edge of town, a big roan gelding that looked as mean-tempered as its owner. There was no second horse. "I can ride," Clara said. "Didn't figure you couldn't." Ronan untied the reins, swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then extended a hand down to her. Clara hesitated. Once she took that hand, once she got on that horse, there was no going back. The town would disappear behind her. Whatever life she'd had, teaching children their letters, Sunday socials, the small respectability she'd managed to maintain, would be gone. "Last chance," Ronan said, and she couldn't tell if he was warning her or testing her. Clara grabbed his hand. His grip was strong, calloused, and he pulled her up behind him like she weighed nothing. She had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from sliding off. He was solid as oak, radiating heat even through his shirt. "Hold on," he said, and kicked the horse into motion. They rode out of Black Hollow at a canter, dust rising behind them. Clara didn't look back. Couldn't afford to. If she looked back, she might lose her nerve. The town fell away. The prairie stretched out, endless and empty. And ahead, the mountains rose like jagged teeth against the sky. Clara tightened her grip and tried not to think about what she'd just done. But Nietzsche, they rode for hours. The sun climbed, peaked, started its descent. Ronan didn't speak, didn't stop. Just kept the horse moving at a steady pace that ate up miles without exhausting the animal. Clara's thighs ached from gripping the saddle. Her arms were tired from holding on. But she didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't change anything. The landscape changed gradually, flat prairie giving way to rolling hills, then rocky outcroppings, then the first real slopes leading up into the canyon lands. The air got thinner, cleaner. The silence was huge, broken only by the horse's hoofbeats and the wind. "Where exactly are we going?" Clara finally asked. "Home." "Which is where?" "Up." That was apparently all the conversation he was willing to have. Clara gritted her teeth and fell silent. The trail got steeper, narrower. Clara looked down once and immediately regretted it. They were climbing along a ridge with a drop-off that had to be 100 feet or more. One wrong step and they'd both go tumbling. But Ronan rode like he'd done this 1,000 times, which he probably had. The horse picked its way confidently across loose scree and around jutting boulders. Finally, as the sun touched the western peaks, they rounded a bend and Clara saw it. A cabin. Not much of one. Single room, maybe, built into the side of a cliff with a roof that looked like it had been patched more times than not. There was a lean-to shelter for the horse, a fire pit outside with rocks arranged for seating, and a creek running clear and cold about 50 yards away. That was it. No neighbors. No town. Just stone and sky and silence. Ronan dismounted, then helped Clara down. Her legs buckled when her feet hit the ground. She'd been on that horse too long. He caught her elbow, steadied her until she got her balance back. "Thanks," she muttered. He grunted, already leading the horse toward the lean-to. Clara stood there, looking at the cabin that was apparently her new home, and felt the full weight of her situation settle over her like a rock slide. This was real. This was happening. She'd been bought and paid for, brought to the middle of nowhere by a man she didn't know, and there was no one coming to save her. She was utterly, completely alone. "There's a pump by the creek," Ronan called out. "Water's good. Cabin's open. Make yourself useful." Clara's temper, which she'd been keeping tightly leashed all day, flared. "Make myself useful?" He looked at her over the horse's back, expression neutral. "You got a problem with that?" "I got a lot of problems with that, actually. You just dragged me up a mountain without so much as a conversation, and now you're ordering me around like what?" He came around the horse, moving toward her with that predator's grace. "Like you're my wife? Because according to that piece of paper Crenshaw signed, that's exactly what you are. That paper doesn't mean anything. It means everything out here." He stopped a few feet away, studying her with those unreadable dark eyes. "Look, I'm not going to pretend this is something it's not. You needed out of that town. I needed, well, that's my business. We made a transaction. Now we make it work. And if I don't want to make it work, then you're free to leave." He gestured toward the trail they'd just climbed. "Walk back down that mountain. Go wherever you want. I won't stop you." Clara stared at him. "You're serious?" "Always am." She looked at the trail, steep, treacherous, already falling into shadow as the sun set. Then she looked at the cabin, then back at Ronan. "Why?" she asked. Why did you buy that ticket if you're just going to let me go? For the first time, something shifted in his expression, something that might have been pain or anger or both. Because that lottery was wrong. Because selling human beings is wrong, no matter what fancy name you put on it. And because he stopped, jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. Because I couldn't stand there and watch it happen and do nothing. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. So this is what? Charity? Call it whatever you want. You're here. You can stay, you can go, your choice. But if you stay, you pull your weight. I don't keep passengers. He turned away, started unsaddling the horse. Clara stood there, furious and confused, and something else she couldn't quite name. Because Ronan Hale, dangerous, violent, half-crazy Ronan Hale, had just given her the one thing no one else had in months. A choice. She could leave. Walk back down that mountain, probably die in the attempt, but at least die free. Or she could stay. Make it work with a stranger who'd bought her like livestock but was offering her something that looked almost like respect. Clara looked at the cabin again. At the creek. At the vast expanse of canyon country spreading out below them, wild and hard and beautiful. Then she walked to the pump, filled a bucket with cold, clean water and carried it toward the cabin. Ronan didn't say anything. Didn't thank her. Just kept working on the horse. But when Clara glanced back, she could have sworn she saw the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. In case. The cabin was as sparse inside as it looked from outside. One room, a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, shelves holding supplies, flour, coffee, salt, beans, other dry goods. A bed in the corner, narrow but sturdy, covered with what looked like a bear pelt. Some pegs on the wall for hanging clothes. That was it. No curtains, no decorations, no softness, anywhere. Clara set the bucket down and looked around, trying to figure out where exactly she fit into this space. Ronan came in carrying his saddlebags. He dumped them by the door, then moved to the fireplace and started building a fire with practiced efficiency. "Bed's yours," he said without looking at her. Clara blinked. "What?" "The bed. It's yours. I'll sleep outside." "You can't sleep outside. It's getting cold. I've slept in worse." He struck a match, held it to the kindling until flames caught. "There's a bedroll in the corner. I'll be fine." "That's ridiculous. This is your home. I'm the one who, You're the one who, what?" He straightened, fixing her with that intense stare. "Who got dragged up here against your will? Who's got every right to be scared and angry and ready to run? Yeah, that's you. So you get the bed and I sleep outside where you don't have to worry about what I might do in the dark." Clara's breath caught, because he was right. She had been worried about that, about what would happen when night fell and there was no one around to hear her scream. "I'm not going to touch you," Ronan said quietly. "Not now, not ever, unless you want me to. I don't care what that paper says. As far as I'm concerned, you're your own person. We clear?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." He turned back to the fire. "There's beans and salt pork. Coffee's strong. Help yourself." He walked out, leaving Clara alone in the cabin. She stood there for a long moment, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. This morning she'd been Clara Whitlock, failed school teacher and lottery participant. Now she was... what? Ronan Hale's wife, who wasn't really his wife? A woman who'd escaped one cage only to find herself in another, stranger one? She didn't know. But as she started preparing food over the fire Ronan had built, as the smell of coffee filled the small space and warmth crept into her bones, Clara felt something she hadn't expected. Relief. Maybe even hope. Outside, she could hear Ronan moving around, setting up his bedroll, talking quietly to the horse. The sounds were oddly comforting, proof that she wasn't completely alone up here. Clara filled 2 tin cups with coffee, strong and black. Then she walked to the door and called out, "Coffee's ready!" Ronan appeared from around the side of the cabin. He looked surprised. "Figured you'd want some," Clara said, holding out one of the cups. He took it, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thanks." They stood there in the doorway as the last light bled out of the sky, drinking bitter coffee and not talking, and somehow it felt like the start of something. Clara didn't know what yet, but whatever happened next, she was done being helpless, done being afraid. If she was going to survive in this harsh, beautiful place with this strange, dangerous man, she was going to do it on her own terms. And that started now. The first week nearly killed her, not literally, though Clara's body certainly tried to convince her otherwise. Every muscle screamed. Her hands, soft from years of holding nothing heavier than chalk and primers, blistered and bled. She discovered parts of her back she hadn't known could hurt. Ronan worked her like a ranch hand. Dawn came cold and sharp at this elevation. Clara would wake to find him already up, fire going, coffee made. He'd hand her a cup without ceremony, then start listing the day's tasks like he was reading from a ledger. Firewood needs splitting, creek's got sediment backed up at the bend, needs clearing, roof's got a leak over the north corner. That first morning, Clara had stared at him. I'm not a laborer. You are now. He'd set down his own cup, fixed her with that level stare. You want to eat? You work. That's how it goes up here. I was a school teacher, and I was a lot of things before I came here. Doesn't matter. Kenyon doesn't care about your resume. She'd wanted to throw the coffee in his face. Instead, she'd set her jaw and picked up the axe he'd left leaning against the woodpile. The axe was heavier than it looked. Her first swing barely bit into the log. The second missed entirely and nearly took off her foot. Ronan had watched from across the clearing, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You're holding it wrong, he finally said. Then show me how to hold it right. He'd walked over, positioned himself behind her without touching, and talked her through it. Hands further apart, let the weight do the work. Don't try to muscle it. You'll just tire yourself out. Clara adjusted her grip, swung again. The axe sank deeper this time, though the log didn't split. Better, Ronan said, and walked away. That one word of acknowledgement had felt like a victory. By noon, Clara had managed to split maybe a third of what Ronan could have done in an hour. Her palms were raw. Sweat plastered her hair to her neck despite the cool air. She was contemplating whether dying of exposure might actually be preferable to another swing when Ronan appeared with a canteen. Drink, he said. You're pushing too hard. You told me to split the wood. I told you to split wood. Didn't say you had to kill yourself doing it. He studied her hands, frowned. You're bleeding. I noticed. There's salve in the cabin. Use it. Infected hands won't do either of us any good. He'd taken the axe from her then, finished the wood pile in 20 minutes, and Clara had hated him a little for making it look so easy. But she'd also noticed that he'd left her enough work to feel useful without destroying herself, and that the next day he'd given her different tasks, ones that didn't require grip strength she didn't have yet. The canyon taught her things the schoolroom never had: how to read weather in the color of the sky, how to find the narrow game trails that made climbing easier, how to tell which plants were safe to eat and which would leave you retching in the dirt. Ronan didn't lecture or explain. He just expected her to pay attention, and somehow that made her learn faster. See that cloud formation? He'd pointed west one afternoon. Storm's coming. 2 hours, maybe 3. Clara had squinted at the sky, which looked perfectly clear to her. How can you tell? Watch the birds. They're flying low, heading for cover. Wind's shifted too. Smell that? She'd inhaled. Caught something sharp and electric beneath the usual pine scent. What is that? Rain. Still 20 miles off, but it's coming. He'd handed her an empty bucket. Fill every container we've got. Stormwater's cleaner than the creek. He'd been right. 2.5 hours later, the sky had opened up like someone tore a hole in it. Clara had watched from the cabin doorway as rain hammered down in solid sheets, filling the buckets they'd set out, turning the world gray and wild. Ronan had stood outside in it, face turned up to the sky, getting absolutely soaked. When he'd finally come in, dripping and somehow looking more alive than she'd ever seen him, Clara had asked, "Why'd you stay out there?" "Felt good," he'd said simply, and started stripping off his wet shirt. Clara had turned away quickly, busying herself with the fire, very aware of the fact that they were alone in a single room and he was half naked behind her. But Ronan had just changed into dry clothes without comment, like her presence didn't matter one way or the other. She couldn't decide if that was respectful or insulting. The nights were the hardest part. Ronan kept his word. Slept outside in his bedroll, even when the temperature dropped and Clara's breath fogged in the cabin. She'd lie in the narrow bed, wrapped in the bear pelt that smelled like wood smoke and something wilder, and listen to the canyon sounds. Coyotes yipping in the distance, wind moving through the pines. Sometimes the scratch of small animals in the rocks. She'd think about Black Hollow. Wonder what happened to Vera, to the other women. Wonder if anyone noticed she was gone, or if the town had already forgotten her. Mostly, she'd think about Ronan. He was the strangest man she'd ever met. He could go hours without speaking, seemed perfectly content with silence that would have driven Clara mad if she'd been alone. But when he did talk, his words were deliberate, chosen carefully, like he'd learned not to waste breath on things that didn't matter. He was also, she was starting to realize, desperately lonely. She'd catch him sometimes, staring out at the canyon with an expression that looked almost like grief, or talking to the horse, actually having conversations with the animal, discussing the day's work like the gelding might answer back. Once she'd heard him singing while he worked on repairing the lean-to, an old ballad, badly off-key, that cut off abruptly when he noticed her listening. "Didn't know you sang," she'd said. "I don't." He'd gone back to hammering nails with more force than necessary. 2 weeks in, Clara woke to find Ronan hadn't made coffee. That alone was alarming. His routines were rigid as clockwork. She dressed quickly, stepped outside, and found him sitting by the cold fire pit, staring at nothing. "Ronan?" He didn't respond, didn't even blink. Clara moved closer, her heart picking up speed. "Ronan, what's wrong?" "Nothing." His voice came out flat. "Go back inside." "Like hell I will. You look—" I said go inside. The words came out harsh enough that Clara actually stepped back. They stared at each other. Clara saw something flicker in his eyes. Anger, yes, but underneath it, something raw. Panic, maybe. Or pain. "Fine," she said quietly. "But I'm making coffee. You want some? It'll be ready." She went back to the cabin, got the fire going, put the pot on. Through the open door, she could see Ronan still sitting there, perfectly still, like he'd been carved from the same stone as the canyon. 20 minutes later, he came in, moved to the fire without looking at her, poured himself coffee with hands that shook just slightly. "Bad day?" Clara asked. "You could say that. Want to talk about it?" "No." He drank the coffee in 3 long swallows, hot enough that it must have burned. "Had a brother. Died 3 years ago today. I don't handle it well." The admission cost him. Clara could see that in the rigid set of his shoulders, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. You didn't know him." Ronan set down the cup. "I'm going up to the North Ridge. Might be gone all day. There's food. Don't wait up." He left before Clara could respond. She watched him disappear up the trail, moving fast like he was trying to outrun something that lived in his own head. Clara spent the day working on the tasks he'd left undone. Mending a torn section of the roof, organizing the food stores, scrubbing pots that probably didn't need scrubbing just to have something to do with her hands. She understood loss. Her parents had died within a year of each other when she was 22. Her father to fever, her mother to what the doctor had politely called a broken heart. But what Clara knew was just giving up. She'd been alone since then, building a life out of whatever pieces she could find. Maybe that's why she'd ended up in that lottery. Maybe that's why Ronan had ended up alone in a canyon. They were both people who'd lost things they couldn't get back. Ronan didn't return until well after dark. Clara had left the lamp burning, food warming by the fire. She heard him come in, waited for him to eat, then spoke from the bed. "You know, if you ever want to talk about him, your brother, I'll listen." Silence. Then, his name was Daniel. He was younger, stupider, braver. A pause. "Better." "I doubt that." "You didn't know him." "I know you." The words came out before Clara could stop them. "A little bit, anyway. And I think anyone who'd buy a lottery ticket just to expose how wrong it was, who'd give a stranger his bed and sleep outside in the cold, who teaches instead of ordering, I think that person is probably better than he gives himself credit for." More silence. When Ronan finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Daniel died because of me, because I was too slow, too stupid to see what was coming. So no, Clara, you don't know me. Not really. Then tell me. Why? So you can pity me? So you can understand the damaged man who bought you?" The bitterness in his voice stung. Clara sat up, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. "Is that what you think? That I pity you? Don't you?" "No." She said it firmly. I think you're carrying weight that's breaking your back. I think you're punishing yourself for something that probably wasn't your fault. And I think you're so determined to be alone that you don't know what to do with someone who actually wants to stay." The words hung in the air between them. "You want to stay?" Ronan asked finally. Clara considered lying, considered all the reasons she should say no. He was volatile, damaged, living in the middle of nowhere with demons he wouldn't talk about. But she thought about the alternative. Black Hollow. The lottery. The man who'd claimed Vera, with his cruel eyes and rough hands. "Yeah," she said. "I do. Is that okay?" "It's your choice." But something in his voice had shifted, softened, maybe. "Then I'm choosing to stay. At least for now." Ronan didn't respond, but Clara heard him settle into his bedroll outside. And later, when she was almost asleep, she could have sworn she heard him say, "Thank you." The canyon changed with the seasons. October bled into November. The aspens turned gold, then dropped their leaves in carpets of yellow that crunched underfoot. Morning frost became morning ice. The creek ran faster, colder, fed by snowmelt from the higher peaks. Clara changed too. Her hands toughened. Calluses replaced blisters. The muscles in her arms and back that had screamed in protest those first weeks now carried weight without complaint. She could split wood for an hour without stopping, climb the steep trail to the North Ridge without gasping for air, read the weather almost as well as Ronan could. She was becoming something else, someone else. One morning, she caught her reflection in the water bucket and barely recognized herself. Leaner, harder, hair sun-streaked despite the cooling weather, skin tanned in a way that would have scandalized Mrs. Talbot. She looked wild. She looked free. "You're getting good at this," Ronan said one afternoon. They were working together to reinforce the lean-to before the serious snow came. Clara was handling the hammer while Ronan held the boards in place. At what? Manual labor? At adapting. He adjusted his grip. Most people can't do that. They get stuck in who they were, can't figure out how to be who they need to be. Clara drove in another nail. Speaking from experience? Maybe. He was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't always this. Living alone, talking to horses. I had a life before." "What kind of life?" "The kind that ended." He released the board, tested its stability. "That's solid. Good work." He always did that. Opened up just enough to show there was something underneath, then shut down before Clara could see what it was. It was infuriating, also kind of fascinating. "Why'd you come here?" she asked. "To the canyon, I mean. Why this particular middle of nowhere?" Ronan picked up another board, positioned it. "Same reason you got in that lottery, I expect. Ran out of better options." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting today." But there was no heat in it, almost fondness, if Clara was reading him right. They worked in companionable silence after that, the kind of quiet that felt comfortable instead of awkward. Clara was learning that Ronan spoke more through actions than words. The way he'd leave the best pieces of meat for her, how he'd adjust the height of the axe blade so it was easier for her to use. Small things that said he was paying attention, that her comfort mattered to him. It was strange building this careful partnership with someone who was technically her husband, but felt more like, what? A friend seemed too simple. An ally, maybe. Someone who saw her as a person instead of a problem to be solved or property to be managed. That night, a storm rolled in hard and fast. Clara woke to thunder that sounded like the sky splitting open. Lightning turned the world white, then black, then white again. Rain hammered the roof with a roar that made conversation impossible. She got up, moved to the door. Ronan was outside somewhere in this mess, and suddenly that seemed completely unacceptable. Clara grabbed a blanket and stepped out into the deluge. "Ronan!" Lightning flashed. She saw him, soaked through, securing the lean-to against wind that was trying to tear it apart. The horse was spooked, pulling against its tether. Clara ran over, getting drenched instantly. "Get inside!" "The shelter's going to collapse," he had to shout to be heard over the storm. "If it does, we lose the horse." "Then let me help." For a second, she thought he'd refuse, send her back to the cabin where it was safe and dry. But then he nodded, pointed to a rope. "Tie that end to the support post. Pull it tight." They worked together in the chaos, Clara following Ronan's shouted instructions, both of them fighting against wind and rain and the general fury of the storm. It was terrifying. It was also exhilarating in a way Clara couldn't quite explain. Finally, the lean-to was secure. The horse calmed. Ronan checked the knots Clara had tied, gave her a quick nod of approval. "Good," he said. "Let's get inside before we both freeze to death." They stumbled into the cabin, dripping and shaking. Clara's teeth were chattering. Ronan immediately moved to build up the fire, his hands steady despite the cold. "You didn't have to come out there," he said, back to her. "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because you were out there." Clara pulled the wet blanket off her shoulders, hung it near the fire. "And because that horse is important, and because I'm not going to sit inside being useless while you handle everything alone." Ronan turned to look at her. Water dripped from his hair. His shirt was plastered to his skin. Something moved in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect, or something Clara couldn't name. "You're shaking," he said. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're half frozen." He grabbed a dry blanket from the shelf, held it out. "Change out of those wet clothes. I'll turn around." Clara took the blanket, her fingers brushing his. For a moment, neither of them moved. The cabin felt suddenly smaller, the air charged with something that had nothing to do with the lightning outside. Then Ronan stepped back, turned to face the wall. Clara changed quickly, hyper-aware of his presence even with his back turned. When she was decent, wrapped in the blanket, she said, "Okay?" He turned around, and Clara saw that he'd changed too. Dry shirt, dry pants, hair roughly toweled. He looked different somehow, less guarded. "Thank you," he said, "for helping. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." Clara moved closer to the fire, trying to absorb its warmth. "We're partners in this, right? Whatever this is." "Are we?" "I think so. Unless you'd rather I go back to being the scared woman who doesn't know which end of an axe to hold." The corner of Ronan's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "That woman was never who you were. You were always this. Just took the canyon to show you." The words settled into Clara's chest, warm and unexpected. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Then people haven't been paying attention. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the cabin, with the fire crackling and the two of them standing close enough to share warmth, Clara felt something shift. The careful distance they'd been maintaining, the walls they'd both built to protect themselves, had developed cracks, and neither of them seemed interested in repairing them. "Ronan?" Clara said softly. "What happened to your brother?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the table, sat down heavily, and started talking. "We were prospecting, up in Colorado near Leadville. Daniel was convinced we'd strike silver, get rich, live like kings." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Clara could hear the pain underneath. "I told him it was a fool's dream, but Daniel never listened to me when it mattered." Clara pulled out the other chair, sat across from him. Waited. "We were in a played-out mine. Dangerous, unstable. I knew better. Should have made him leave, but he found a vein, small but real, and he was so damn happy." Ronan's jaw worked. Then the tunnel collapsed. Happened so fast. One second he was laughing, showing me the silver. Next second, nothing but rocks and dust. "You couldn't have known." "I should have." The words came out sharp. "I was older. I was supposed to protect him. That was my job, and I failed." Clara reached across the table, put her hand over his. "It was an accident. Accidents happen. That doesn't make it your fault. Doesn't make it not my fault either." But he didn't pull his hand away. "I dug for 3 days, moved tons of rock with my bare hands, found him on the 3rd day. He'd been dead for hours. Maybe died instantly, maybe suffered. I'll never know." "I'm sorry," Clara said, and meant it with everything she had. "After that, I couldn't be around people, couldn't stand the pity in their eyes, couldn't handle questions about what happened, so I came here, built this place, figured I'd live alone until I died, and that seemed like a fair punishment for getting my brother killed. That's not living, that's just existing. Maybe that's all I deserve." Clara squeezed his hand. "That's not true. You saved me, Ronan. You and that lottery ticket. You saved Vera and Sarah and all those other women from being trapped with men who treat them like property. That matters. That means something. Does it? Yes. She said it fiercely. It means you're not the person you think you are. It means you're better than the guilt you're carrying. Ronan looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara saw the walls come down, saw the man underneath all that carefully controlled distance. He was broken, damaged, haunted by ghosts he couldn't outrun. He was also kind, protective, strong in ways that had nothing to do with physical strength. You scare me sometimes, Ronan said quietly. Clara blinked. I scare you? You see too much. Say things that cut right through the walls I've built. He turned his hand over, laced his fingers through hers. You make me think maybe I don't have to stay broken. And that's terrifying. Because you've gotten comfortable being broken? Because I don't know who I am if I'm not. Clara understood that. She'd built her whole identity around being a school teacher, around being respectable and proper and controlled. Losing that had felt like dying. But being here, in this canyon, with this man who demanded she be strong instead of soft, it had rebuilt her into something new. Maybe Ronan could be rebuilt too. Then figure it out, she said. We'll figure it out together. Why would you do that? Why would you stay with someone as damaged as me? Because I'm damaged too. Because we're both people who lost everything and ended up here. And because, she paused, realizing the truth as she said it, because I like who I am when I'm with you. You don't want me to be small or quiet or easy. You just want me to be capable, real. That's worth staying for. Ronan's grip tightened on her hand. Clara. Whatever he was going to say got cut off by a sound from outside. Not thunder, not wind, hoofbeats. They both froze. Ronan's expression shifted instantly from vulnerable to dangerous. He dropped Clara's hand, moved to the door, grabbed the rifle that was always propped in the corner. Stay inside, he said. What's happening? Don't know yet. But people don't ride up here in a storm unless they're desperate or looking for trouble. He checked the rifle, made sure it was loaded. Either way, it's not good. Clara's heart hammered. She moved to the window, peered out through the rain-streaked glass. Lightning flashed, illuminating 3 riders approaching the cabin. They were hunched against the weather, but even from here, Clara could see they were armed. Ronan, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. There's 3 of them. I see them. His voice had gone cold, flat. The voice of someone who'd done violence before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Get away from the window. Find something to put your back against. Who are they? Only one reason men ride up here in a storm. Ronan moved to position himself beside the door, rifle ready. They're looking for me. The riders stopped about 20 yards from the cabin. One of them dismounted, walked forward slowly with his hands visible. Even through the rain, Clara could see the badge on his chest. Law. Ronan Hale, the man shouted. We need to talk. Ronan's jaw tightened. About what? About Black Hollow. About a lottery that's got some folks asking questions. Clara felt her stomach drop. They'd come for her. Someone had decided the lottery was wrong after all, or maybe they just wanted their property back. She stays here, Ronan called back. That's not negotiable. Not hear about her, hear about you. The lawman took another step forward. You planning to let us in, or are we going to have this conversation in the rain? Ronan looked at Clara, something conflicted in his eyes. Then he lowered the rifle slightly and opened the door. The 3 men filed in, dripping and cold. The one with the badge was older, maybe 50, with a weathered face and tired eyes. The other 2 were younger, deputies probably, hands resting on their guns. Sheriff Morgan, the older man said. From Copper Falls, you remember me? I remember. Ronan's voice was carefully neutral. What do you want? Morgan looked around the cabin, his gaze landing on Clara. Ma'am, you're Clara Whitlock? I am. You here of your own free will? Clara straightened her spine. I am. You understand you've got options? That lottery wasn't exactly legal. You could leave, press charges, get compensation. I don't want any of that, Clara said firmly. I'm staying. Morgan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. He turned back to Ronan. That's not why we're here anyway. We got word from Denver about the Leadville mine collapse, about your brother. Ronan went very still. What about it? Investigation's been reopened. New evidence suggests the collapse wasn't an accident. Someone had been sabotaging mines in the area, cutting support beams to make claims look played out. Then they'd buy the claims cheap and rework them. The silence in the cabin was absolute. Daniel's death wasn't your fault, Morgan said quietly. It was murder. And we've got the man who did it in custody. Thought you'd want to know. Clara watched Ronan's face, saw shock, disbelief, then something that looked like grief mixed with rage. Who? The word came out like gravel. Mine foreman named Jessup. He confessed to 17 separate incidents. Your brother's was one of them. Morgan shifted his weight. I know that doesn't bring Daniel back, but I thought you should hear it from me instead of reading it in some newspaper. Ronan said nothing. He just stood there, rifle hanging loose in one hand, looking like the floor had dropped out from under him. Clara moved to his side without thinking, put her hand on his arm. He didn't shake her off. There's one more thing, Morgan said. Men from Black Hollow have been asking about you, about the lottery. Some of them are saying you interfered with town business, that you've got no right to keep Miss Whitlock here. Like hell they are, Clara snapped. I'm not property. The lottery was wrong and everyone knows it. I agree with you, ma'am, but that doesn't stop men like Mayor Crenshaw from making noise. They're talking about coming up here, bringing you back by force if necessary. Let them try, Ronan said. His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. This is my land. She's here by choice. Anyone who tries to change that is going to have a serious problem. Morgan held up his hands. I'm not here to arrest anyone or drag anyone back. Just giving you fair warning, things might get ugly. Things are always ugly, Ronan said. We'll handle it. The sheriff nodded. I believe you will. He gestured to his deputies. We should go. Storm's breaking. You two, watch yourselves. And Hale? I'm sorry about your brother. Daniel was a good kid. Yeah, Ronan said softly. He was. The lawmen left. Clara and Ronan stood in the doorway, watching them disappear into the rain-washed darkness. Are you okay? Clara asked. No. Ronan set the rifle down, leaned against the doorframe like he needed the support. 3 years. I spent 3 years thinking I killed him, hating myself for it, and it was someone else's fault. It wasn't on you. Doesn't feel real. He rubbed his face with both hands. Doesn't change anything. He's still dead. But you can stop punishing yourself for it. Clara moved closer. You can let yourself grieve without the guilt. That's something. Ronan looked at her, and Clara saw tears in his eyes for the first time. He didn't cry, just stood there with wet tracks on his face, raw and exposed in a way that made her chest ache. I don't know how to do that, he said. Then we'll figure it out. Clara took his hand again, just like we figured out everything else. He pulled her closer, wrapped his arms around her in a hug that was more desperation than comfort. Clara held him, feeling him shake, and realized something that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. She was falling for this broken, complicated man. And judging by the way he was holding her like she was the only thing keeping him standing, he might be falling for her too. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain slowed to a drizzle. The wind died down. And in the cabin, 2 damaged people held each other and tried to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could heal. They held each other until the fire burned low and the night grew quiet around them. When Ronan finally pulled back, his face was composed again, the vulnerability locked away behind familiar walls. But something had changed between them. Some invisible line had been crossed that neither of them could uncross. You should sleep, he said, his voice rough. It's late. Clara didn't want to let go. Didn't want to retreat to opposite corners of the cabin and pretend they hadn't just shared something that felt bigger than both of them. But she nodded, stepped back, gave him space. What about you? I'll keep watch, just in case. You think they'll come tonight? The men from Black Hollow? Ronan moved to the window, looked out at the darkness. No. Morgan would have warned us if it was that urgent, but they'll come eventually. Men like Crenshaw don't let go of things they think belong to them. I don't belong to anyone. He glanced at her, and something flickered in his expression. I know, but they don't see it that way. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could handle whatever came. Instead, she asked, Will you at least sit down? You look exhausted. I'm fine. You're not fine. You just found out your brother's death wasn't your fault, that you've been carrying guilt for something you didn't do, and now there's a threat coming. You're allowed to not be fine. Ronan's shoulders sagged slightly. When'd you get so good at reading me? Around the same time you started leaving the best coffee for me in the mornings. Clara pulled out a chair at the table. Sit, please. He did, moving like every muscle hurt. Clara poured him water from the bucket, set it in front of him. He drank it mechanically, staring at nothing. Tell me about him, Clara said, sitting across from him. About Daniel. Not how he died. Who he was. Ronan was quiet for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then he started talking, his voice low and distant, like he was pulling up memories from somewhere deep. He was loud. That's the first thing I remember about him. Even as a baby, he screamed louder than any kid I'd ever heard. Our mother used to say he came into the world angry at how small it was. A faint smile touched his lips. He never grew out of that. Always wanted more, wanted bigger, wanted to see everything, do everything, be everything. Sounds exhausting. It was. But it was also... Ronan paused, searching for words. He made everything feel possible, like the world was smaller than his dreams, and if he just pushed hard enough, those dreams would come true. And you? I was the practical one. The one who said no when Daniel wanted to jump off cliffs into swimming holes, or ride untrained horses, or bet our last money on poker games he couldn't win. He shook his head. Spent my whole life trying to keep him safe. Then the one time it actually mattered. You did everything you could. You dug for 3 days, Ronan. You moved tons of rock with your bare hands. That's not failing. That's loving someone so much you break yourself trying to save them. His jaw tightened. Didn't save him, though, did I? No. But you honored him. You grieved him. You've been keeping his memory alive every single day by punishing yourself for his death. Clara reached across the table, took his hand again. Maybe it's time to honor him differently. By living. By letting yourself be happy. I don't know if I remember how. Then learn. We'll both learn. She squeezed his hand. You taught me how to split wood and read weather and survive in a place that should have killed me. I can teach you how to let go of guilt that's eating you alive. Ronan looked at their joined hands, then up at her face. You're remarkable. You know that? Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm really not. You are. You got dragged up a mountain by a stranger, worked yourself half to death learning skills you never needed before, and now you're sitting here trying to fix someone who's been broken for years. That's remarkable. Or stupid. No, he said it firmly. Not stupid. Brave. The word settled between them, heavy with meaning. Clara had never thought of herself as brave. She'd always been the cautious one, the rule follower, the woman who colored inside the lines. But maybe Ronan was right. Maybe choosing to stay, choosing to fight for something instead of running from it, maybe that was its own kind of courage. I'm scared, she admitted, of what's coming, of the men from Black Hollow, of what happens if this doesn't work, whatever this is between us. Me too. Ronan stood, pulled her up with him. For a moment they just stood there, close enough that Clara could feel the heat radiating off him, could see the pulse beating in his throat. But I'm more scared of losing you, of them taking you back to that town and me never seeing you again. That terrifies me more than anything else. Clara's breath caught. Ronan? He cupped her face with both hands, his palms rough and warm against her skin. I know this is complicated. I know we're complicated. But I need you to know, you're not just some woman I bought at a lottery. You're... He struggled with the words. You're the first person in 3 years who's made me want to wake up in the morning, who's made this place feel like home instead of a prison. You matter to me, Clara, more than I know how to say. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You matter to me too, so much that it scares me. Good. He leaned down, pressed his forehead against hers. We'll be scared together. They stood like that for a long time, breathing each other's air, neither wanting to break the moment. Finally, Clara whispered, You should sleep. Even if it's just for a few hours. Only if you sleep too. Deal. Ronan hesitated, then said, The bed's big enough for 2, if you're comfortable with that. I don't want to be alone tonight. Clara's heart hammered, but she nodded. Okay. They moved to the bed awkwardly, both hyper-aware of each other. Ronan lay down first, staying on the far edge, giving her as much space as possible. Clara climbed in beside him, and the bear pelt settled over both of them. The bed was narrow. Even with Ronan pressed against the wall, there were maybe 6 inches between them. Clara could feel the heat of him, could hear his breathing in the darkness. "Clara?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Yeah? Thank you for staying. For everything." She rolled onto her side, facing him. In the dim glow from the banked fire, she could just make out his profile. "Thank you for giving me a choice. For seeing me as a person instead of property. That's worth more than you know." Ronan turned his head, met her eyes. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out and took her hand under the blanket. Their fingers laced together, and Clara felt something in her chest crack open. This was dangerous. Getting attached to someone this broken, this haunted, in a situation this precarious. But it was also real in a way nothing else in her life had ever been. They fell asleep like that, hands joined, breathing synchronized, 2 damaged people finding comfort in each other's presence. And for the first time since she'd climbed onto that horse in Black Hollow, Clara felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. She felt safe. Morning came too soon and too loud. Clara woke to the sound of horses, multiple horses moving fast. Ronan was already up, already at the window with his rifle, his body tense. "How many?" Clara asked, throwing off the blanket. 6. Maybe 7. His voice was cold, controlled. "They brought a crowd." Clara joined him at the window. In the pale morning light, she could see the riders approaching. Rough men on rougher horses, all armed. Leading them was a figure she recognized even at this distance. Mayor Crenshaw. "That son of a—" Clara bit off the curse. "He actually came. Told you. Men like him don't let go." Ronan checked his rifle, then handed Clara a pistol from the shelf. "You know how to use this? I've never shot a gun in my life." "Then today you learn. Point, squeeze the trigger, don't close your eyes. It'll kick, so brace for it." He met her eyes. "I don't want you to have to use it, but if things go bad, I need to know you can protect yourself." Clara took the pistol, her hands shaking slightly. The weight of it felt wrong, alien, but she nodded. "Okay." The riders stopped about 30 yards out. Crenshaw dismounted, his bulk making the process awkward. He had 2 men flanking him, hired muscle from the look of them. The others stayed mounted, hands on their weapons. "Hail!" Crenshaw's voice echoed off the canyon walls. "We need to talk." Ronan opened the cabin door but stayed in the frame, rifle held loosely but ready. "About what?" "About the property you stole from Black Hollow. About Clara Whitlock, who entered into a legal contract with our town." "She entered a lottery," Ronan called back. "I bought a ticket. I won. That's how lotteries work." "That lottery was for the benefit of Black Hollow. You had no right to interfere." Clara stepped into view beside Ronan. "I had every right to be won by whoever bought a ticket. That was the deal, and I choose to stay here." Crenshaw's face reddened. "You don't understand what you're saying, girl. You've been isolated, confused. This man has been nothing but respectful," Clara interrupted. "Which is more than I can say for the system you created. Selling women like cattle? That's what you did, Mayor. Don't dress it up as something noble." "We were trying to save the town." "By sacrificing women? By treating us like we were worth less than livestock?" Clara felt her anger rising, hot and righteous. "I'd rather be here, free to make my own choices, than back in Black Hollow being someone's property." One of the hired men spoke up, his voice rough. "Boss, this is taking too long. Let's just take her and go." "You try it," Ronan said quietly, "and I'll put a bullet through your skull before you take 3 steps." The man's hand moved toward his gun. Ronan's rifle came up in one smooth motion, aimed dead center at the man's chest. "Go ahead, see what happens." The tension stretched taut as a wire. Claire could hear her own heartbeat, could feel sweat trickling down her spine despite the cold morning air. Crenshaw held up his hands. "Now, let's all calm down. Nobody needs to get shot. Hale, be reasonable. The town invested money in that lottery. Miss Whitlock has value." "I'm not property." Claire's voice cracked like a whip. "I'm a human being, and I'm staying here by choice. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the law." "We are the law in Black Hollow. one of the other men said. No, a new voice called out. You're not. Everyone turned. Sheriff Morgan rode into the clearing, his 2 deputies behind him. He looked tired but determined.
Sheriff, Crenshaw said, his tone shifting to something approximating friendliness. Good to see you. We're just here to retrieve stolen property. Miss Whitlock isn't property, Morgan said flatly. And according to territorial law, that lottery you ran was illegal. I've got documentation from the territorial governor's office. You want to press charges against Hale? You're welcome to try. But I guarantee you'll end up in more trouble than him. Crenshaw's face went from red to purple. That lottery saved the town. We had investors, agreements. You had a scheme that violated about 6 different laws. Morgan dismounted, walked forward with deliberate slowness. Now, you can turn around and ride back to Black Hollow. Or I can arrest all of you for attempted kidnapping, trespassing, and making threats with deadly weapons. Your choice. The hired men looked at each other, clearly reconsidering their employment. Crenshaw sputtered, trying to find words that wouldn't come. This isn't over, he finally managed. Yeah, it is, Ronan said. Go home, Crenshaw. Tell your investors they backed the wrong horse. Tell them Clara Whitlock is exactly where she wants to be, and anyone who tries to change that will answer to me. You're threatening me? I'm making a promise. Ronan's voice was ice cold. This is my land. She's here by choice. You come back, you won't get a warning next time. Morgan stepped between them. That's enough. Crenshaw, mount up. You and your men are leaving. Now. For a moment, Clara thought Crenshaw might actually be stupid enough to push it. Then one of the hired men said, Boss, this ain't worth dying over, and turned his horse. The others followed suit. Crenshaw stood there for a moment longer, his whole body vibrating with impotent rage. Then he heaved himself back onto his horse and jerked the reins around. You'll regret this, he spat at Clara. Both of you. Already regretting not shooting you, Ronan muttered, just loud enough for Clara to hear. The group from Black Hollow rode away, their horses kicking up dust. Morgan waited until they were out of sight, then turned to Ronan and Clara. You two all right? We're fine, Clara said, lowering the pistol she'd been gripping so hard her knuckles were white. Thank you for coming back. Had a feeling Crenshaw wouldn't let it go. Morgan looked at Ronan. You made an enemy today. He's got connections, money. He'll try something else. Let him try. Ronan lowered his rifle. I've dealt with worse. Morgan nodded slowly. I believe you have. He remounted his horse. Watch yourselves. And Miss Whitlock, if you ever change your mind, if you need help, you send word to Copper Falls. I'll make sure you're taken care of. I appreciate that, Clara said, but I won't need it. This is where I belong. The sheriff tipped his hat and rode away with his deputies. Clara and Ronan stood in the doorway, watching until the dust settled. That was too close, Clara said finally. Yapped it. Ronan set his rifle aside, scrubbed his hands over his face. But it's done. For now, anyway. Clara looked at him, really looked at him. He'd been ready to kill for her, had stood between her and 7 armed men without hesitation. The realization hit her hard. You would have died for me, she said softly. If it came to that, you would have fought all of them. Yes. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Why? Ronan turned to face her fully. Because you're mine to protect. Not mine like property. Mine like you chose me, and I choose you, and that means something. It means I don't let anyone hurt you, ever. Clara felt her eyes burn. I choose you too. In case that wasn't clear. Something broke in Ronan's expression. The last wall crumbling, the final defense falling away. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate and hungry and tasted like relief. Clara kissed him back with everything she had, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, the words rough and unpracticed. I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first day when you grabbed my hand and got on the horse. Maybe when you came out in the storm to help with the lean-to. Maybe every single moment since. But I love you, Clara Whitlock, and I need you to know that. Clara's breath hitched. I love you too. Even though you're stubborn and damaged and live in the middle of nowhere. I love you.
He kissed her again, softer this time, like he was memorizing the taste of her. When he pulled back, there were tears on his face. Daniel would have liked you, he said. He would have said I didn't deserve you, and he would have been right. Stop that. Clara wiped the tears from his cheeks with her thumbs. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be loved. And I'm going to keep telling you that until you believe it. Might take a while. Good thing I'm not going anywhere. They stood there in the doorway holding each other while the sun climbed higher and the canyon came alive with morning sounds. And for the first time in 3 years, Ronan felt something other than guilt and grief. He felt hope. The days that followed had a strange quality to them, like the world had shifted on its axis and everything looked different now. Clara and Ronan moved around each other with a new awareness, their careful partnership transforming into something deeper. They still worked dawn to dusk. The canyon didn't care about emotions, it still demanded survival. But now they worked side by side, close enough to touch, stealing moments when they could. A hand on the small of Clara's back as Ronan passed behind her, her fingers brushing his when she handed him tools, kisses stolen between tasks, quick and sweet and promising more later. At night they shared the bed without awkwardness. Ronan would pull Clara against his chest, wrap his arms around her, and they'd talk in the darkness about everything and nothing. She learned about his childhood in Missouri, about the father who died when he was 12, about the years he'd spent trying to keep Daniel safe and fed. He learned about her parents' deaths, about the loneliness of being the only educated woman in Black Hollow, about dreams of teaching in a real school in a real city. You could still do that, Ronan said one night, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. If you wanted, I wouldn't stop you. I know. Clara pressed closer to him. But I don't want to. Not anymore. That was someone else's dream. The woman I am now wants different things. Like what? Like this. Like building something that matters with someone who sees me as an equal. Like waking up every morning and knowing I chose my life instead of having it chosen for me. She twisted to look at him. Is that enough? Am I enough? Without the teaching and the respectability and all the things I used to think defined me? Ronan cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. You're more than enough. You're everything. They made love for the first time 3 weeks after the confrontation with Crenshaw. It wasn't planned or seductive. They'd been working on winterizing the cabin, both covered in dust and sweat, when Ronan had made a joke and Clara had laughed, really laughed. And suddenly they were kissing and the need became too much to ignore. It was awkward at first. They fumbled with clothes and angles, bumped heads, laughed at themselves. But then Ronan looked at her with such raw vulnerability that Clara's breath caught, and she understood this wasn't just physical for him. It was trust. It was letting someone see all his broken pieces and believing they wouldn't leave. I've got you, she whispered, pulling him down to her. I'm not going anywhere. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the bear pelt, both shaking slightly. Ronan held her like she might disappear if he let go. That was, Clara started. Terrifying, Ronan finished. Yeah, but also perfect. He kissed her shoulder. You're perfect. I'm really not. I'm stubborn and opinionated, and I still can't split wood as fast as you. Good. I'd be worried if you could. He pulled her closer. I'm serious, Clara. I never thought I'd feel this way about anyone. Never thought I deserved to. But you make me believe maybe I can be more than the guilt I've been carrying. You are more. You've always been more. She turned in his arms, met his eyes. We're going to be okay. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Promise? Promise. Winter came hard and fast. Snow started falling in mid-November and didn't stop. The canyon transformed into something alien and beautiful, white and silent and deadly if you weren't prepared. But they were prepared. They'd spent weeks stockpiling firewood, preserving food, making sure the cabin could withstand the storms. The isolation that might have driven Clara mad a few months ago now felt like a gift. They were snowed in for days at a time, just the two of them and the horse, and it was enough. More than enough. Ronan taught her to track animals in the snow, to ice fish in the frozen creek, to recognize the different qualities of cold that meant blizzard versus just heavy snowfall. Clara taught him to read, really read, not just puzzle out words but lose himself in stories. She'd brought a few books from Black Hollow, and they read them aloud to each other by firelight.
I never understood why people like this stuff, Ronan said one night, listening to Clara read from a collection of Poe stories. Always seemed like a waste of time. And now? Now I get it. It's not about the story. It's about sharing the experience with someone else. He pulled her closer. Everything's better when you share it with the right person. Clara marked the page and set the book aside. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I'm 32. That's not old. It is in canyon years. All this hard living, sleeping on rocks, fighting off mayors. She grinned at him. You'll be decrepit by 40. He tickled her ribs, making her shriek with laughter. They wrestled playfully, ending up in a tangle of limbs on the floor, both breathless. I love you, Ronan said, suddenly serious. I know I say it all the time now, but I need you to hear it. You saved my life, Clara, not by pulling me out of a river or stopping a bullet, but by making me want to live again. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You saved mine too, by giving me a choice when everyone else tried to take them away.
They made love on the floor in front of the fire, slow and tender, taking their time. And later, wrapped in blankets and each other, Clara thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, she'd been desperate and alone, about to be sold like property. Now she was here, in love with a man who'd been a stranger, building a life that felt more real than anything she'd known before. Christmas came and went without ceremony. They marked it by sharing a bottle of whiskey Ronan had been saving, by roasting the last of the salt pork and making something approximating a feast. Clara carved them each a simple gift, a wooden spoon for Ronan, a hair comb for herself, and they exchanged them with the solemnity of people trading gold. Best present I've ever gotten, Ronan said, turning the spoon over in his hands. It's a spoon.
It's a spoon you made for me. That makes it valuable. He kissed her forehead. Thank you. January brought the worst storms. They lost 3 days to a blizzard that dumped so much snow the door wouldn't open. They rationed food carefully, kept the fire burning, and waited it out. On the third day, when they finally dug themselves out, the world looked reborn, pristine and untouched, like they were the only two people left alive. We might be, Ronan joked, surveying the endless white. Everyone else probably had the good sense to move somewhere warm and miss all this. Clara gestured at the frozen landscape. They don't know what they're missing. He looked at her, snow caught in her hair, cheeks pink from cold, eyes bright with life. No, they really don't. By February, they'd settled into a rhythm that felt permanent. Wake before dawn. Tend the fire. The horse. Check the supplies. Work together on whatever needed doing, clearing snow, checking traps, maintaining the cabin. Evenings were for reading or talking or making love. Nights were for holding each other and planning a future that seemed possible now. We should build another room, Clara said one night. Expand the cabin, make it a real home instead of just a shelter. Ronan considered this. You planning on staying that long? I'm planning on staying forever, if you'll have me. Clara Whitlock, are you proposing to me? She laughed. We're already married, remember? According to that piece of paper Crenshaw signed. That paper doesn't count, not really. Ronan sat up, suddenly serious. I want to do this right. I want you to choose me not because some lottery said so, but because you want to, really want to. Clara sat up too, her heart hammering. What are you saying? Ronan got out of bed, rummaged through his belongings, came back with something small in his hand. My mother's ring. Daniel and I carried it for years, thinking maybe we'd find someone worth giving it to. He opened his palm, revealing a simple silver band with a small stone. I want you to have it, not as a transaction or a legal requirement, as a promise, that I'll spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Clara's breath caught. Ronan, will you marry me? Really marry me? Not because you have to, but because you want to? Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her, and Clara tasted salt. Couldn't tell if it was her tears or his. We'll do it properly, Ronan said against her lips. Soon as the snow melts, we'll ride to Copper Falls. Find a preacher or a justice of the peace. Make it official. It's already official, Clara said. It's been official since the moment I chose to stay.
Since the moment you gave me that choice. They fell back into bed, holding each other, the ring warm on Clara's finger. And outside, the canyon was silent and still, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what these two broken people would build together. March brought the thaw. Snow melted in rushing streams. Ice broke apart with sounds like gunshots. The canyon came alive again, birds returning, animals emerging from winter dens, the world turning green and possible. Ronan and Clara made plans. They'd expand the cabin, build a second room, maybe start a small garden in the spring. They talked about riding to Copper Falls for supplies, about maybe, eventually, making peace with whatever was left of Clara's old life. "Do you miss it?" Ronan asked one evening. They were sitting outside, watching the sunset paint the canyon in shades of gold and red. "Teaching, I mean, the work you used to do." Clara thought about it. "Sometimes I miss the kids, mostly, seeing them learn to read, watching them figure things out. But I don't miss being that person, the Clara who was small and scared and trying so hard to be acceptable. That woman died when she got on your horse. And who are you now? Someone stronger. Someone who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to fight for it." She leaned against him. "Someone who loves you." Ronan wrapped an arm around her. "We could teach, eventually. There's families starting to settle in the valley below. Kids who need schooling. We could, Clara corrected. "If we do this, we do it together." He smiled, pressed a kiss to her temple. Together. I liked the sound of that. They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded. And Clara thought about how far she'd come from that terrified woman standing on a platform in Black Hollow. That woman would have never believed this was possible. This contentment, this love, this wild and beautiful life. But it was possible. It was real. And it was hers. The sound of hoofbeats shattered the peace. Both of them were on their feet instantly, Ronan's hand going to the rifle he kept nearby. But as the rider came into view, Clara felt her blood turn to ice. It was one of Crenshaw's hired men, the rough one, who'd wanted to just take her by force, and he was riding hard, his horse lathered and heaving. "Hail!" the man shouted. "Don't shoot! I ain't here to fight!" Ronan kept the rifle aimed at him. "Then why are you here?" The man pulled his horse to a stop, hands clearly visible. "To warn you. Crenshaw. He's done waiting. He's hired a group out of Denver, professional guns. They're coming for you both." Clara's stomach dropped. "When?" "Tomorrow. Maybe the day after. They're expensive, but Crenshaw sold half his stake in the general store to pay them." The man looked genuinely worried. "These ain't like us. Hired muscle who'll back down when things get real. These are killers. They'll do whatever Crenshaw's paying them to do." "Why warn us?" Ronan asked, suspicion clear in his voice. "Because I got a sister, and I've been thinking about what would have happened if she'd been in that lottery." The man spat to the side. "What Crenshaw did was wrong. What he's doing now is worse. I ain't going to be part of it." Ronan lowered the rifle slightly. "How many?" "4 that I know of, maybe 5. All experienced, all willing to kill." He looked at Clara. "Ma'am, you should leave. Tonight. Get somewhere safe." "I'm not leaving," Clara said firmly. "Then you're both going to die." The man shook his head. "I did what I could. Warned you. Rest is on you." He turned his horse and rode away, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Clara and Ronan looked at each other. "We need to leave," Ronan said. "Pack what we can. Ride out tonight. Head to Copper Falls. Let Morgan handle this." "No." Clara's voice was steady. "This is our home. We fought for it. We built a life here. I'm not running." "Clara, these are professional killers." "I don't care." She grabbed his arms, made him look at her. "I spent my whole life running from things. From my parents' deaths, from poverty, from the reality that no one valued me. I ran all the way to Black Hollow and ended up in a lottery because I didn't have the courage to stand and fight. I'm done running, Ronan. This is where we make our stand." He stared at her, conflict warring in his expression. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Okay, we stand, we fight, together." "Together," Clara agreed. They spent the night preparing. Ronan showed Clara how to really use the pistol, how to aim, how to reload. They moved supplies, created defensive positions, planned escape routes if things went completely wrong. "If they kill me," Ronan said as they worked, "you run. You understand? Don't try to fight them alone. Just run. Same goes for you. If I go down, you don't play hero. You survive. Like hell I will. If you die, I'm dying with you.
Clara stopped, looked at him. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Maybe, but it's the truth. He cupped her face. I found you, Clara. After 3 years of just existing, of thinking I didn't deserve anything good, I found you. I'm not losing you. Not to Crenshaw, not to hired guns, not to anything. We survive this together, or we don't survive at all. She kissed him hard, pouring everything she felt into it. Then we better survive, because I'm not ready to die. I just started living. They made love one more time, desperate and fierce, like they were trying to memorize each other's bodies. And afterward, lying in the darkness, Clara whispered, I love you, Ronan Hale, no matter what happens tomorrow. I love you too, he whispered back. Always. Neither of them slept much that night. They held each other and waited for dawn, for whatever was coming, and tried not to think about all the ways this could end badly. But as the first gray light of morning crept into the cabin, Clara felt something settle in her chest. She wasn't the scared woman who'd stood on that platform anymore. She was stronger now, harder, capable of things she'd never imagined, and she had Ronan beside her, damaged, dangerous, devoted Ronan, who'd given her a choice when everyone else tried to take them away. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That would have to be enough. The sun rose slow and red, like the sky was bleeding. Clara stood at the window, pistol in her hand, watching the trail that led up to the cabin. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made her heart jump. Beside her, Ronan checked his rifle for the third time, his movements mechanical, precise. They'll come from the east, he said quietly. That's the easiest approach. But we need to watch the North Ridge, too. If they're smart, they'll split up, try to flank us. And if they're really smart, then they'll wait until we're asleep and burn us out. He glanced at her. You sure about this? Last chance to run. Clara's grip tightened on the pistol. I'm sure. They waited. Minutes crawled by like hours. The horse shifted nervously in the lean-to, sensing the tension. Clara's palms were sweating despite the cool morning air. Then Ronan stiffened. There. Clara followed his gaze. 4 riders, moving single file up the narrow trail. They weren't rushing, weren't trying to hide. They rode like men who knew they had the upper hand and didn't care who saw them coming. Only 4, Clara whispered. The man said maybe 5. 5th one somewhere else, probably circling around. Ronan moved away from the window, positioned himself by the door. Remember what I taught you. Aim center mass, don't hesitate, these men won't. Clara's mouth was dry. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The riders stopped about 50 yards out. One of them dismounted, a tall man with a gray beard and cold eyes. He carried himself like someone who'd done this before, many times. Ronan Hale, he called out. I'm John Garrett. Mr. Crenshaw hired me to retrieve his property. You can make this easy or hard, your choice. She's not property, Clara shouted before Ronan could respond. I'm a free woman making my own decisions. Garrett's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I got no quarrel with you, but I got a contract says otherwise. You come peaceful, nobody gets hurt. You make us work for it, well, he shrugged. That's on you. Contract's worth less than the paper it's printed on, Ronan said. Clara stays here. You turn around and ride back to whoever's paying you, tell them the job's canceled. Can't do that? Professional reputation to consider. Garrett gestured to his men. 2 of them started moving, spreading out to flank the cabin. Last chance, Hale. Send the woman out, or we come in and get her. Ronan's answer was to aim his rifle at Garrett's chest. Garrett sighed. Hard way it is. He dove for cover as Ronan fired. The world exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Clara ducked instinctively as bullets punched through the cabin walls. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Ronan fired again, then again, each shot deliberate and controlled. North window, he shouted. Clara, north window! She scrambled over, saw one of Garrett's men trying to circle around. Her hands shook as she raised the pistol, tried to remember everything Ronan had taught her. Center mass. Don't close your eyes. Squeeze. Don't pull. She fired. The kick nearly knocked the gun from her hand. The shot went wide, hitting rock instead of flesh. The man saw her, grinned,
started to raise his own weapon. Ronan's rifle barked. The man went down hard, clutching his shoulder. Good distraction, Ronan said, already moving to the other window. Keep them honest. They can't shoot what they can't see. Clara's ears were ringing. The smell of gunpowder burned her nose. She fired again, forcing another man to take cover. She wasn't hitting anyone, but she was making them think twice about rushing the cabin. Ronan was a different story. Every shot he took was measured, calculated. He wasn't trying to kill, not yet, but he was making it clear that approaching the cabin would cost them. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. An eerie silence fell. "You're just making this harder," Garrett called from behind a boulder. "We got all day. You got limited ammunition. Math's not in your favor." He was right. Clara and Ronan had maybe 30 rounds between them. Against 5 professional killers with presumably unlimited supplies, they couldn't win a prolonged fight. "We need to change the equation," Ronan muttered. He looked around the cabin, his mind clearly working through options. Then his eyes landed on the lamp oil. "Clara, how crazy are you feeling?" "Pretty crazy. Why?" "Because I've got an idea, and it's stupid, but it might work," he explained quickly. Clara's eyes widened. "That's not just stupid, that's suicidal. You got a better plan?" She didn't. "Okay, let's do it." Ronan grabbed 2 bottles, emptied them of their contents. Water, whiskey, didn't matter. He filled them with lamp oil, stuffed cloth into the necks. Clara watched, her heart hammering. "When I light these and throw them, they're going to return fire hard. You stay down, understand? Don't try to be a hero." "Same goes for you," he smiled grimly. "I'm always a hero. It's a problem." He kissed her quick and hard. "I love you, whatever happens." "I love you too. Don't you dare die on me." Ronan lit the first bottle, stood, and hurled it through the broken window in one smooth motion. It arced through the air, trailing smoke, and smashed against the boulder Garrett was hiding behind. Fire spread instantly, oil burning hot and bright. Garrett and his men scattered, shouting. Ronan threw the second bottle, catching another position. More fire, more chaos. "Now!" Ronan grabbed Clara's hand, pulled her toward the back of the cabin. "Go! Go! Go!" They burst out the back door, running for the tree line. Bullets kicked up dirt at their heels. Clara's lungs burned. She could hear Ronan's breath harsh beside her, could hear men shouting behind them. They made it to the rocks, dove behind cover. Ronan immediately turned, started laying down covering fire. Clara reloaded her pistol with shaking hands, the way he'd taught her. "There's the 5th one," Ronan said, pointing. A man was circling wide, trying to cut off their escape route. "Stay here. I'm going to—" "No." Clara grabbed his arm. "We stay together. That was the deal." "Clara, together." A bullet ricocheted off the rock next to them. Ronan cursed, pulled her closer to cover. "Fine. Together. But when I move, you move. And if I say run, you run. Deal?" "Deal." They moved through the rocks like ghosts, using every bit of cover. Ronan's years of living in the canyon paid off. He knew every path, every hiding spot. But Garrett's men knew their business too. They were spreading out, coordinating, slowly tightening the noose. Clara's pistol clicked empty. She'd used all her ammunition. She looked at Ronan. "I'm out." He handed her his knife. "Then we get creative." They ended up pinned behind a large outcropping, Garrett's men approaching from 3 sides. Clara could hear them calling to each other, coordinating their final push. Her hands were slick with sweat. The knife felt heavy and useless. "I'm sorry," Ronan said quietly. "I should have made you leave. Should have—" "Shut up." Clara kissed him fiercely. "I chose this. I chose you. No regrets." Gunfire erupted again, but this time from a different direction. Clara and Ronan both froze, confused. The shooting wasn't aimed at them. It was aimed at Garrett's men. "What the hell?" Ronan peered around the rock. Riders were pouring into the canyon from the south trail. Clara counted 6, maybe 7. Leading them was Sheriff Morgan, rifle blazing. Behind him. "Is that the man from last night?" Clara asked. It was. The hired muscle who'd warned them had brought reinforcements, and they were fighting Garrett's crew with everything they had. The battle shifted instantly. Garrett's men, caught between Ronan and the new arrivals, tried to regroup, but Morgan's group had the high ground, the numbers, and the element of surprise. It was over in minutes. When the dust settled, 2 of Garrett's men were down, wounded but alive. A third had his hands up, surrendering. Garrett himself was pinned behind the same boulder he'd started at, his beard singed from the burning oil. "Drop your weapons," Morgan shouted. "It's over, Garrett." "The hell it is. I got a contract." "You got nothing but a jail cell waiting." Morgan fired a shot that kicked up dirt inches from Garrett's boot. "Drop your weapons." Garrett looked around, saw his men dead or captured, saw the odds had turned completely against him. With visible reluctance, he threw out his pistol, then his rifle. Morgan's deputies swarmed forward, securing the prisoners. Morgan himself rode over to where Clara and Ronan were still crouched behind the rocks. "You two all right?" Ronan stood slowly, helping Clara up. "Define all right." "Well, you're breathing. That's something." Morgan dismounted, looked at the burning cabin in the distance. "Sorry we didn't get here sooner. Got word from my friend here," he gestured at the hired muscle, "that Garrett was coming. Rounded up everyone I could trust." The man who'd warned them approached, looking uncomfortable. "Name's Jack Morrison. I know I don't deserve your thanks after what I was part of with Crenshaw, but I couldn't let him do this. Couldn't let him send killers after folks who just wanted to be left alone." Clara studied him. "You've got a sister," you said. "Yes, ma'am. Name's Emma. She's 14. And when I thought about her being in that lottery someday, being treated like property..." He shook his head. "I couldn't stomach it anymore, so I did what I could to make it right." "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "You saved our lives." Morrison nodded, looking relieved. Morgan put a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, son. Takes courage to go against your employer like that." "What happens now?" Ronan asked. "Now I arrest Garrett and his crew, take them back to Copper Falls for trial. Attempted murder, trespassing, assault. They're going away for a long time." Morgan looked at Ronan seriously. "And I'm going to need you to come testify, both of you." Clara felt Ronan tense beside her. "How long?" "Few days, maybe a week. Just long enough to get their statements on record. Let the territorial judge sort this out." Morgan seemed to read Ronan's reluctance. "I know you don't like towns, Hale, but this is important. Crenshaw needs to answer for what he's done. And your testimony is key to making that happen." Ronan looked at Clara. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to refuse, to go back to his isolation, warring with the need to finish what they'd started. "We'll come," Clara said. "Together." "Together," Ronan echoed, though he sounded less certain. They spent the rest of the day dealing with the aftermath. The cabin was damaged but salvageable. One wall had burned, but the stone foundation held. Most of their supplies were intact. The horse had survived, spooked but unharmed. 2 of Garrett's men had died in the fighting. Morrison's group buried them on the ridge. No ceremony, no words, just dirt and rocks in the wind. Clara watched from a distance, feeling nothing. These men had come to kill her and Ronan. She couldn't summon sympathy for them. That night they slept in what remained of the cabin, wrapped in blankets, the smell of smoke heavy in the air. Ronan held Clara like he was afraid she'd disappear. "I thought I was going to lose you," he said into the darkness. "When they had us pinned, when we were out of ammunition, I thought that was it. That I'd finally found something worth living for, and it was going to be taken away. But it wasn't." Clara pressed closer to him. "We survived. We're still here. This time. What about next time? What if Crenshaw hires more men? What if... Then we deal with it. We keep dealing with it until he gives up or until..." She didn't finish the sentence. "Until one of us doesn't survive," Ronan finished for her. "That's what you were going to say?" "Yes. No point in lying. But I'd rather live 1 year with you facing whatever comes than live 50 years somewhere safe and boring. Wouldn't you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Yeah, I would." They left for Copper Falls 2 days later. The ride down from the canyon felt strange, like leaving sanctuary for hostile territory. Clara kept looking back, watching the cabin, their home, disappear behind them. Ronan rode tense and silent, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. Morgan met them at the edge of town with a contingent of deputies. "Crenshaw knows you're coming," he said. "There's been talk. I've got men watching to make sure nothing happens, but stay close to me. Don't wander off alone." Copper Falls was bigger than Black Hollow, more established. It had real streets, real buildings, a courthouse that looked like it had been standing for decades. People stared as they rode through, whispering behind their hands. "They know who we are," Clara said quietly. "Whole territory knows by now," Morgan replied. "Story of the bride lottery, Hale's stand, the shootout. It's been in all the newspapers. You two are famous, or infamous, depending on who you ask." Clara felt exposed, vulnerable. She missed the canyon, missed the isolation where nobody cared about their business. Morgan set them up in a boarding house run by a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Kowalski. She showed them to a small room with a narrow bed, looked them both up and down, and said, "No trouble. I hear shouting, fighting, gunfire. You're out. Clear?" "Clear," Clara said. When Mrs. Kowalski left, Ronan moved to the window, looked out at the street below. "I don't like this. Too many people, too many variables. It's only for a few days." Clara joined him, took his hand. "Then we go home." "Home." He tested the word. "Never thought I'd call anywhere home again. But that cabin, with you, yeah, that's home." The trial started the next morning. The courthouse was packed. Seems everyone in Copper Falls wanted to see the bride lottery case. Clara and Ronan sat in the front row, very aware of the eyes on them. Garrett and his surviving men were brought in shackles, looking defeated. But it was the second case that really drew the crowd. The territorial prosecutor had brought charges against Mayor Crenshaw for running an illegal lottery, human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. Crenshaw sat at the defendant's table, sweating through his expensive suit, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. When he saw Clara, his face twisted with rage. "That woman is my property," he shouted, standing up. "The contract was legal. She belongs to Black Hollow." The judge, a severe woman in her 50s named Harriet Walsh, slammed her gavel. "Mr. Crenshaw, you will sit down and be silent, or I will have you removed from this courtroom. Do you understand?" Crenshaw sat, but his glare could have melted iron. The prosecutor called Clara to the stand first. She walked up on shaking legs, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Then she sat and faced a room full of strangers who wanted to hear about the worst day of her life. "Miss Whitlock," the prosecutor began, "tell us about the bride lottery. In your own words." Clara took a breath, found Ronan in the crowd. He nodded, giving her strength. So she talked. About the desperation that drove her to enter. About standing on that platform like livestock. About the fear that came with being sold to a stranger. "But Mr. Hale didn't treat you as property, did he?" the prosecutor asked. "No. He gave me a choice. He gave me freedom when everyone else wanted to take it away." Clara looked directly at Crenshaw. "He saw me as a person. That's more than the town that sold me ever did." Crenshaw's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggested she'd been coerced by Ronan, that she was suffering from some kind of captivity delusion. Clara shut him down coldly. "I know my own mind, sir. I made my choice with clear eyes and full knowledge of what I was doing. If anyone's delusional, it's the people who thought selling human beings was acceptable." The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Walsh gavelled for order, but Clara saw approval in her eyes. Ronan testified next. He was uncomfortable on the stand, answering questions in clipped sentences, clearly hating every minute of exposure. But his testimony was powerful. He described entering the lottery specifically to expose its cruelty, described offering Clara freedom, described defending their home from hired killers. "Mr. Hale," the prosecutor said, "why did you enter that lottery? You could have just reported it to the authorities." "Because authorities don't always care about vulnerable women in dying towns. Because I wanted to make sure at least one person got out with their dignity intact." Ronan looked at the jury. "I bought that ticket planning to free whoever's name I drew. I didn't plan on falling in love, but that's what happened, and I'd do it again, same way every time." Clara felt tears on her cheeks. The trial lasted 3 days. Witness after witness testified. Other women from the lottery, some who'd been claimed by cruel men and had suffered. Jack Morrison testified about Crenshaw hiring Garrett's crew. Sheriff Morgan testified about the attack on the cabin. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman read the verdict in a clear voice. "We find the defendant, Mayor Harold Crenshaw, guilty on all counts." The courtroom exploded. Crenshaw stood, shouting denials, claiming conspiracy. Judge Walsh sentenced him to 15 years in territorial prison, plus fines and restitution to all the women involved in the lottery. Garrett and his surviving men got similar sentences for attempted murder. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Clara and Ronan were mobbed by reporters, people wanting to shake their hands, women thanking Clara for speaking up. It was overwhelming, suffocating. Sheriff Morgan rescued them, escorted them back to the boarding house through a back route. "You two are heroes now," he said. "Like it or not, this case is going to change how people think about women's rights in the territories." "I don't want to be a hero," Ronan said. "I just want to go home." "Then go. You're free. Crenshaw can't hurt you anymore. Neither can anyone else who thinks women are property." That night, Clara and Ronan packed their few belongings. They'd leave at dawn, ride back to the canyon, try to rebuild the life that had been so violently interrupted. Clara stood at the window, watching the stars. Ronan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "You were amazing in there," he said. "The way you spoke, the way you stood up to Crenshaw's lawyer. You're the strongest person I've ever known."
"I learned from the best." She leaned back against him. "You ready to go home?" "More than ready. This place, these people, it's too much. I need the quiet, need the space." "Need me?" Clara asked softly. "Need you most of all." He turned her to face him. "Clara, when we get back, I want to do this right. Find someone who can marry us properly, not some legal document from a corrupt lottery. I want vows that mean something, a ceremony that's about us choosing each other."
"We already chose each other." "I know, but I want the world to know it too." He kissed her forehead. "Will you marry me? Again? Really, truly?" Clara's answer was to kiss him, long and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered, "Yes, always yes." They left Copper Falls at first light, riding into the sunrise. Behind them, the town was just waking up, people starting their days, going about their business. Ahead, the canyon waited, wild and harsh and beautiful. Home. The ride back took 2 days. They camped under the stars the first night, making love on their bedrolls while coyotes sang in the distance. The second day, they pushed hard, both of them eager to get back. When the cabin finally came into view, battered and partially burned but still standing, Clara felt something loosen in her chest. They were home. They'd survived. They spent the next 2 weeks repairing the damage. Ronan rebuilt the burned wall while Clara cleaned out the smoke damage, salvaged what she could. They worked side by side, not talking much, just being together in the comfortable silence they'd built. One evening, as the sun set over the canyon, Ronan took Clara's hand and led her outside. In the clearing in front of the cabin, he'd arranged rocks in a circle, built a small fire in the center. "What's this?" Clara asked. "Our wedding." He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. "I wrote some vows. Figured since there's no preacher up here, we'd do it ourselves, if that's okay with you." Clara's throat tightened. "It's perfect." They stood facing each other in the firelight, hands joined. Ronan read first, his voice rough with emotion. "Clara Whitlock, I was broken when I met you, thought I deserved to be alone, to suffer for sins I didn't even commit. You showed me different. You showed me strength I didn't know existed, showed me that love isn't something you fall into. It's something you choose, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I choose you. Today, tomorrow, for as long as we both live. I promise to protect you, respect you, and love you with everything I have. You're my home. You're my future. You're everything." Clara was crying openly now. She pulled out her own piece of paper, her hand shaking. "Ronan Hale, you gave me something nobody else ever did. You gave me a choice. You saw me not as property or a problem to be solved, but as a person capable of making my own decisions. You challenged me to be stronger than I thought I could be. You loved me when I was at my worst, when I was angry and scared and didn't know who I was anymore. And you helped me become someone I'm proud to be. I choose you. I choose this life, this canyon, this wild and beautiful existence. I promise to stand beside you, to fight with you and for you, and to love you even when you're stubborn and damaged and impossible. You're my partner. You're my equal. You're my everything." Ronan slipped his mother's ring off Clara's finger, then put it back on with ceremony this time. "With this ring I marry you, not because a lottery said so or because society demands it, but because I want to, because I choose to. Clara took his hand, held it over her heart. I don't have a ring for you, but I give you this promise, my loyalty, my strength, my love, for as long as I live. They kissed as husband and wife, truly married now in the way that mattered. The fire crackled. The stars came out. And in that moment, Clara felt more complete than she'd ever felt in her life. Later, lying in bed together, Clara said, "Do you think we'll ever be normal? Have a quiet life without people trying to kill us?" Ronan laughed softly. "Probably not, but normal's overrated anyway. You think we should worry about what comes next? Next is tomorrow, and we'll handle it the way we've handled everything else. Together." He pulled her closer. "Besides, after everything we've been through, what could possibly be worse?" Clara poked him in the ribs. "Don't say things like that. You'll jinx us." "There's no such thing as jinxes," says the man who spent 3 years punishing himself for something that wasn't his fault. "Fair point." He kissed the top of her head. "Okay, new rule. No talking about the future. We just live day by day, deal with problems as they come, and try not to get shot at too often." "Sounds like a plan." They fell asleep tangled together, the canyon quiet around them. And Clara dreamed of a future that looked nothing like her past, wild and uncertain and absolutely perfect. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Clara was outside washing clothes when she heard horses. Her hand went automatically to the pistol she now wore at all times. But when the riders came into view, she relaxed. Sheriff Morgan, accompanied by 3 women Clara recognized from the lottery: Vera Colton, Sarah Brennan, and Ida Fletcher. "Hope we're not intruding," Morgan said, dismounting. "Not at all." Clara called into the cabin. "Ronan, we've got company." Ronan emerged, took one look at the group, and his expression softened. "Ladies, Sheriff, what brings you all the way up here?" Vera spoke first, her voice stronger than Clara remembered. "We came to thank you, both of you. What you did at the trial, testifying, standing up to Crenshaw, it mattered. The judge ruled the whole lottery invalid. We're all free to go where we want, do what we want." "And the men who claimed you?" Clara asked. "Most of them slunk away when they realized they had no legal standing," Sarah said. She looked different too, taller somehow, more confident. "A few tried to cause trouble, but Sheriff Morgan here made sure they understood property law doesn't apply to people." "We wanted you to know," Ida added. "You changed our lives, gave us hope that we could be more than what that town tried to make us." Clara felt overwhelmed. "I just told the truth." "You did more than that. You showed us what courage looks like." Vera stepped forward, took Clara's hands. "Thank you for everything." The women stayed for lunch. They talked and laughed and shared stories of what they planned to do now that they were free. Vera was going to Denver to study nursing. Sarah had a job offer at a newspaper in Cheyenne. Ida was opening a bakery in Copper Falls with money from the restitution fund. "What about you two?" Sarah asked Clara. "You staying up here in the canyon?" Clara looked at Ronan, saw the question in his eyes. They hadn't really talked about long-term plans beyond surviving, but looking around at the cabin they'd rebuilt together, at the life they were creating, she knew the answer. "Yeah," she said. "We're staying. This is home." Ronan's hand found hers under the table, squeezed gently. The visitors left before sunset, riding back down the mountain trail. Clara and Ronan stood watching until they disappeared from view. "You ever regret it?" Ronan asked. "Choosing this life? You could have gone with them, started over somewhere civilized." "This is civilized. It's just our version of it." Clara turned to face him. "No regrets. Not one. You?" "My only regret is that I didn't find you sooner." He pulled her close. "But we've got time now. Years and years, if we're lucky. And if we're not lucky, then we make the most of whatever time we get." They went inside as the sun set, closing the door on the outside world. Inside the cabin, they built a fire, made dinner, and talked about small things. Whether to expand the garden in spring, if they should get chickens, how to reinforce the roof before next winter. Normal things. Domestic things. Things that felt impossibly precious after everything they'd survived. That night as they lay in bed, Clara said, "I love you, Ronan Hale. My husband, my partner, my home." "I love you too, Clara Hale." He said her new name like a prayer. "Thank you for choosing me, for seeing past all the damage and finding something worth saving. You were always worth saving. You just needed someone to show you. They made love slowly, tenderly, taking their time. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they fell asleep to the sound of the canyon wind and the promise of tomorrow. Whatever came next, challenges, threats, struggles, they'd face it together. Because that's what partners did. That's what love meant. And in a world that had tried so hard to break them both, they'd found something stronger than fear, stronger than guilt, stronger than any force that tried to tear them apart. They'd found each other. And that was enough. Spring came late that year, arriving in fits and starts like it couldn't quite commit to the season. One day the world would be green and warm. The next, a cold snap would remind them that winter hadn't completely surrendered. But slowly, inevitably, the canyon came alive again. Clara stood in the clearing they designated for the garden, hands on her hips, surveying the turned earth. Her back ached from hours of digging, her fingernails were black with dirt, and she'd never been happier.
"You're smiling at dirt," Ronan observed from where he was mending fence posts. "That's either a very good sign or a very concerning one." "I'm smiling because this is ours, because we're building something that lasts." She gestured at the neat rows she'd created. "Tomatoes here, beans there, maybe some squash if we can keep the deer out." "The deer will win. They always do." "Not if I build a proper fence." "You know how to build a fence now?" He sounded amused.
Clara picked up a rock, threw it at him. He dodged easily, laughing. "I know how to learn. You taught me that." He abandoned the fence post, came over to stand beside her. Together they looked at the garden plot, at the cabin behind it with its new roof and rebuilt wall, at the lean-to that now housed 2 horses instead of 1. "We've come a long way," Ronan said quietly, "from that day in Black Hollow." 7 months. Clara shook her head. "Feels like a lifetime." "Feels like yesterday." He took her hand, laced their fingers together. "You know what today is?" "Tuesday?" "It's the day I stopped feeling guilty." He said it simply, like announcing the weather. "Woke up this morning, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't immediately think about Daniel. Didn't immediately feel that weight on my chest. Just woke up next to you, thought about the fence posts that needed fixing, and got up." Clara turned to face him fully. "That's good, Ronan. That's really good. It feels wrong, like I'm forgetting him." "You're not forgetting him. You're healing. There's a difference." She squeezed his hand. "Daniel wouldn't want you to suffer forever. You know that, right? Knowing it and feeling it are different things." "I know." She did know. She still thought about her parents sometimes, about the life she'd left behind in Black Hollow. But the pain had dulled, transformed from a sharp blade to a distant ache. Time did that, if you let it. But we're allowed to move forward. We're allowed to be happy. "Are we?" He said it like a genuine question. "Yes. We fought for this. We earned it. And we're going to enjoy it, guilt-free for as long as we can." She pulled him toward the cabin. "Now come on. I'm starving, and you promised to teach me how to make that stew you're always going on about." They cooked together, moving around the small kitchen space with practiced ease. Clara had learned that Ronan was surprisingly good at cooking. Years of living alone had forced him to develop skills beyond beans and salt pork. He could make bread that was almost good, stew that was actually delicious, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. "More salt," he instructed as Clara stirred the pot. "And stop stirring so much. You'll break down the vegetables." "You're very bossy in the kitchen. You're very bad at taking instruction." She elbowed him. He kissed her temple. They'd developed this rhythm, teasing that masked affection, roughness that hid tenderness. It worked for them. Over dinner, Ronan said, "Sheriff Morgan sent word. There's a circuit preacher coming through Copper Falls next month. He asked if we wanted to make it official, in front of people, with witnesses." Clara considered this. They'd married themselves under the stars, and that felt more real than any ceremony could. But she understood what Ronan was offering, a chance to be recognized by the wider world, to have their union documented in ways that would protect them legally. "Do you want to?" she asked. "I want whatever you want." That's not an answer. He set down his spoon, looked at her seriously. "I want people to know you're my wife. I want it written down in some official book, so that if anything happens to me, You inherit this land, this cabin, everything I have. I want you protected." Clara's throat tightened. "Nothing's going to happen to you. Probably not. But I'm a man who lived 3 years thinking I killed my brother. I've learned not to assume the future will be kind." He reached across the table, took her hand. "So yeah, I want to do it properly, if you're willing." "I'm willing," she smiled, "but I'm not wearing a fancy dress. That woman who wore dresses and worried about propriety is dead." "Good. She was boring anyway." They rode to Copper Falls a month later, arriving on a Wednesday afternoon when the town was relatively quiet. Sheriff Morgan met them at the edge of town, grinning broadly. "There they are! The canyon couple themselves!" He shook Ronan's hand, tipped his hat to Clara. "Good to see you both. The preacher's staying at the church. Father Sullivan, good man, doesn't ask too many questions. You ready?" "As we'll ever be," Clara said. They walked through town together, and Clara noticed something different. People didn't whisper and stare like before. Instead, they nodded respectfully, some even calling out greetings. Women smiled at her. Men acknowledged Ronan with careful respect. "The trial changed things," Morgan explained. "People know what you stood for. Know you fought back against corruption and won. You've got a reputation now." "I don't want a reputation," Ronan muttered. "Too late. You're stuck with it." Father Sullivan was a rotund man with kind eyes and a thick Irish brogue. He welcomed them into the small church, asked a few perfunctory questions about their faith and intentions, then said, "Right then. Let's get you two properly married before you change your minds." The ceremony was simple. Morgan and his wife stood as witnesses. A few townspeople filtered in, curious. Clara wore the same practical clothes she'd worn for the ride: leather pants, a simple shirt, boots. Ronan wore his cleanest work clothes and looked distinctly uncomfortable. Father Sullivan led them through vows that were more traditional than the ones they'd spoken to each other under the stars. But when he got to, "Do you, Ronan Hale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Ronan's answer was immediate and firm. "I do. I absolutely do." Clara's vows were just as certain, and when Father Sullivan pronounced them husband and wife, when Ronan kissed her in front of all these witnesses, Clara felt something settle in her chest. This was real. This was recognized. No one could ever question it again. They signed the marriage register. Clara's hand shook slightly as she wrote Clara Hale for the first time in an official document. Then it was done. They were married in the eyes of the law, the church, and society. Outside, Morgan's wife had organized a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just bread and cheese and beer. A few people gathered to wish them well. Vera showed up, having heard they were in town, and hugged Clara so hard it hurt. "Look at you," Vera said, holding Clara at arm's length. "You look like you've been through a war and came out stronger." "I have been through a war. Several, actually. And you won. That's what matters." Vera glanced at Ronan, who was talking awkwardly with Sheriff Morgan. "He treating you right?" "Better than right. He treats me like an equal." "Then you're one of the lucky ones." Vera's expression turned serious. "Most women don't get that. Don't get to choose their own path. You chose yours. Denver, nursing school, you're doing it. You're Busto. Because you showed me it was possible. Because you stood up and said no when everyone else was saying we had to accept our lot." Vera squeezed Clara's hand. "Thank you for being brave enough to fight back." After the celebration, Ronan and Clara found themselves walking through Copper Falls, not quite ready to ride back to the canyon. They wandered past storefronts and houses, watching people go about their ordinary lives. "Could you do it?" Ronan asked suddenly. "Live here? In a town with neighbors and society and all that comes with it?" Clara thought about it honestly. Maybe once, before, but now? She looked around at the buildings, the crowds, the noise. No. I'd feel trapped. The canyon's where I belong, where we belong. Good. He sounded relieved. Because I was prepared to try if you wanted it, but I'm glad you don't. They stopped at the edge of town, looking out at the mountains in the distance. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and red. You know what I've learned? Clara said. Freedom isn't about where you are. It's about who you're with and whether they respect your choices. I was trapped in Black Hollow even though I could walk anywhere I wanted, But I'm free in the canyon, even though it's isolated and hard because you see me as my own person. That's not freedom I'm giving you. That's just basic human decency, which is rarer than it should be. She leaned against him. The world tells women we need to be small, quiet, grateful, that we should accept whatever life gives us and not ask for more. But you never asked me to be small. You demanded I be strong. And that made all the difference. Ronan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Daniel used to say the world was smaller than it should be, that it tried to make people fit into boxes they were never meant for. I thought he was just being dramatic, but he was right. The world does that. And people who don't fit, people like you, like me, we have to fight just to breathe. So we fight, and we build spaces where we can breathe freely. Clara turned to face him. That's what we've done. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. He kissed her forehead. Yeah, we are. They rode back to the canyon the next morning, both eager to get home. The trip that had once seemed arduous now felt comfortable, familiar. They knew every turn in the trail, every landmark, every place where the path got treacherous. When they finally crested the last rise and saw the cabin waiting below, Clara felt her chest expand with something that might have been joy, or might have been relief, or might have been both. Home, she said.
Home, Ronan agreed. The summer that followed was the best time of Clara's life. They worked the garden, watched things grow, harvested vegetables that tasted sweeter because they'd planted them. They rode to the valley below, met some of the families settling there, and Clara started teaching a few children basic reading and arithmetic. It wasn't like teaching in Black Hollow had been. There was no school building, no formal curriculum. She'd meet with kids under a tree, use whatever materials they had, and teach them what she could. But it was real. It mattered. You're good at this, Ronan observed one afternoon. He'd ridden down with her, ostensibly to help, but mostly just to watch. The kids love you.
I love them. They're curious and wild, and they don't care that I'm wearing pants instead of a dress. Clara closed the primer she'd been using. Their parents are grateful too. Most of them can't read themselves, want better for their children. You thinking about making it more formal? Regular schedule? Actual lessons? Maybe, if more families settle here. She looked at him. Would that bother you? Having people know where we live, coming up to the canyon, as long as they don't try to stay. He helped her pack up the books. But teaching, it's good work, important work. You should do it. So she did. Word spread through the valley that Clara Hale offered lessons to anyone who wanted them. More kids showed up. Some adults too, embarrassed but determined to learn. Clara taught them all, patient and thorough, remembering what it felt like to be powerless, and knowing that literacy was its own kind of freedom. Ronan built her a small structure in the clearing, not quite a school, but a shelter where lessons could happen when the weather was bad. Clara cried when she saw it, understanding the gesture for what it was. He was supporting her dream, making space for it, treating her work as valuable as his own. You're going to make me soft, she told him, wiping her eyes. You're already soft. That's not a bad thing. I thought I had to be hard to survive.
You can be both. Hard when you need to be, soft when you want to be. That's called being human. He pulled her close. Besides, you've seen me cry more times than I can count. Fair's fair. They celebrated their first anniversary in October, 1 year since that lottery in Black Hollow. They marked it by riding back to the town, not to see people, but to see how far they'd come. Black Hollow looked even worse than Clara remembered. More buildings abandoned, more people gone. The town was dying, slowly but surely, choking on its own corruption and bad decisions. They didn't stay long. Just long enough to see the general store, Crenshaw's pride and joy, boarded up and empty. Just long enough to hear that most of the lottery participants had left, found better lives elsewhere. Good, Clara said as they rode away. No one should have to stay in a place that treats them as less than human. You think we should feel bad? That the town's dying? Clara considered this. No, some things deserve to die. Towns built on greed and exploitation, systems that treat people as property, those things shouldn't survive. Better they collapse so something healthier can grow. Ronan looked at her with something like awe. When'd you get so wise? When I married a man who forced me to think for myself instead of just accepting what I was told. They made love that night with particular intensity, both of them aware of how close they'd come to never finding each other, how easily Clara could have been claimed by someone else, how easily Ronan could have stayed isolated and broken in his canyon.
I almost didn't buy that ticket, Ronan admitted in the darkness afterward. I stood there in Black Hollow, watching them set up, and part of me wanted to just leave. Mind my own business. What changed? I saw your face. You were standing there trying so hard to look brave, but I could see you were terrified. And I thought about Daniel, about how he'd have fought if he'd seen something so wrong, about how I'd become the kind of man who turned away from injustice because it was easier. He pulled her closer. So I bought the ticket, and you changed my life. We changed each other's lives. Clara kissed his shoulder. That's how it works. We save each other. Winter came again, and they weathered it better this time. They had more supplies, a stronger cabin, the knowledge that they could survive whatever the canyon threw at them. They spent long evenings reading, talking, planning for spring. I want to expand the teaching, Clara said one night. Maybe build a proper school building. Get more books, slates, supplies. Make it something real. We'd need money for that. Materials. I could charge a small fee, just enough to cover costs. Or we could fundraise, ask the Valley families to contribute what they can. Ronan was quiet, thinking. Then he said, There's a mine, about a day's ride north. It played out years ago, but there's equipment there. Wood, nails, tools. No one's using it. We could salvage what we need. Is it safe? Safe as anything else we do. He met her eyes. If you want to build a school, we'll build a school, whatever it takes. They spent the early spring salvaging materials from the abandoned mine. It was hard work, dangerous work, but they did it together. Ronan handled the heavy lifting while Clara sorted and organized. Slowly, they accumulated enough to start building. The school went up over the course of 2 months. The Valley families helped, grateful for what Clara was doing for their children. Men donated labor, women brought food, kids ran messages and carried supplies. It became a community project, binding people together. On the day they finished, Clara stood in front of the small building, one room, rough-hewn benches, a blackboard Ronan had made from painted wood, and felt overwhelmed. This is real, she said to no one in particular. This is actually happening. You made it happen, Ronan said. He'd come up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. You saw what was needed and you built it. That's remarkable. We built it. Together. We build everything together now. He turned her to face him. That's marriage. That's partnership. That's us. The school opened in May with 12 students ranging from age 6 to 43. Clara taught reading, writing, basic arithmetic. Ronan sometimes stopped by to teach practical skills, tracking, weather reading, survival techniques. Between them, they offered an education that was more useful than anything the children would have gotten in a traditional school. One afternoon, Sheriff Morgan rode up to the school, dismounted, and waited until lessons were over. When the last student left, he approached Clara and Ronan with a serious expression. There's been talk, he said without preamble. Territorial Governor's Office heard about what you're doing up here. Education for settlers, community building. They're impressed. Okay, Clara said cautiously. And they want to officially recognize this as a school, provide some funding, send supplies, maybe even pay you a small salary for teaching. Clara's eyes widened. They want to pay me? For this? They want to support what you're building. The territory needs educated citizens. You're providing that. Morgan smiled. You've come a long way from that lottery, Clara, both of you. You should be proud. After Morgan left, Clara and Ronan sat on the steps of the school, watching the sun set over the valley. Government funding, Clara said, shaking her head. Never thought I'd see the day. You earned it. You're doing important work. We're doing important work. She leaned against him. I couldn't do any of this without you. You know that, right? I know you could. You're the strongest person I've ever met. But I'm glad you don't have to. He kissed her temple. We're better together. Summer brought new challenges. A family moving through the territory stopped at the school, seeking shelter. They were escaping an abusive situation back east. The father had beaten the mother so badly she'd lost sight in one eye. They had 3 children, all terrified and traumatized. Clara took one look at them and said, You can stay, as long as you need.
Ronan set them up in a small cabin in the valley, helped the father find work with a rancher who needed hands. The mother, whose name was Elizabeth, started helping Clara at the school. The children slowly began to heal, though the oldest, a girl named Anna, flinched at sudden movements and couldn't sleep without nightmares. "She reminds me of me," Clara told Ronan one night. "Before, when I was so scared of everything, so convinced I had to make myself small to survive. What helped you stop being scared?" "You, the canyon. Learning that I could be strong, that strength was an option." She looked at him. "Anna needs that too. Needs to know she doesn't have to stay small and scared." So Clara worked with Anna the way Ronan had worked with her, teaching her skills, showing her she was capable, demanding she be strong instead of accepting weakness. It was hard. Anna resisted, fought back, cried in frustration. But slowly, over weeks and months, she began to change, began to stand straighter, speak louder, look people in the eye, began to believe she was worth more than the violence she'd escaped. "You're saving her," Elizabeth said to Clara one afternoon. Tears streaked her face. "The way someone saved you." "We all save each other," Clara replied. "That's how it works. We pass forward the kindness we've received." By the time fall came around again, the school had grown to 23 students. The territorial government had sent supplies, real books, slates, chalk, maps. Clara had a salary that wasn't much, but was more money than she'd ever made in Black Hollow. The Valley community was thriving, bound together by shared purpose and mutual support. And through it all, Clara and Ronan's marriage deepened. They'd moved past the desperate intensity of new love into something steadier, more enduring. They still fought sometimes. Ronan could be stubborn, Clara could be relentless, but they fought fair, talked things through, never went to bed angry. "We're boring now," Clara joked one evening. They were sitting outside the cabin, watching stars emerge. No more shootouts or trials or dramatic standoffs, just teaching and farming and living. "Boring's underrated," Ronan said. "I'll take boring with you over exciting with anyone else." "That's possibly the least romantic thing you've ever said." "Want me to be romantic? Fine." He turned to face her, took both her hands. "Clara Hale, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. You took a life that was handed to you and remade it into something beautiful. You turned trauma into teaching, fear into strength, isolation into community. You wake up every day and choose to be kind, to be brave, to be bigger than the cruelty the world showed you. And somehow, impossibly, you chose me. You saw a broken man living alone in a canyon and decided he was worth saving. That's not romance. That's a damn miracle." Clara felt tears streaming down her face. "Okay, that was romantic. I have my moments." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "I love you. Every day more than the last. And I'm grateful, so grateful, that some lottery ticket brought you into my life. Best $10 you ever spent. Best $10 anyone ever spent." They made love under the stars that night, slow and sweet, taking their time. And Clara thought about how strange life was, how unpredictable. A year and a half ago, she'd been desperate and alone, about to be sold like property. Now she was married to a man she loved, teaching children, building a community, living a life that felt meaningful. The world hadn't gotten any kinder. There was still corruption, still violence, still people who saw others as property to be exploited. But there were also people fighting back, carving out spaces where dignity and respect were possible. And that mattered. That was worth fighting for. 2 years after the lottery, on a crisp October morning, Clara stood in front of her school and rang the bell to start the day. Students filed in, 27 now, including Anna, who was reading at a level far beyond her age and talking about maybe becoming a teacher herself someday. Ronan rode up as the last student entered, dismounted, came to stand beside Clara. "Full house today," he observed. "Always is. We're going to need a bigger building soon." "Then we'll build a bigger building." Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "You know what I realized?" "What's that?" "I'm happy. Like genuinely, deeply happy. Not just content or satisfied, but actually happy." She looked up at him. "I didn't think that was possible for people like us. People who've been through what we've been through." Ronan smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and erased years from his face. "Yeah, me too."
Think it'll last?
Nothing lasts forever, but we've got today, and probably tomorrow, and the day after that. That's enough. Is it? Has to be. We can't control the future. We can only show up for each other every day and do our best. That's all anyone can do. Clara nodded. He was right. They couldn't guarantee forever, but they could choose each other again and again for as long as they both lived. They could build something that mattered, something that helped others, something that proved love and partnership were possible even in the hardest circumstances. That evening, after lessons ended and students went home, Clara and Ronan walked through the valley together. They visited families, checked on Elizabeth and her children, made sure everyone had what they needed for the coming winter. When they finally climbed back up to their cabin as the sun set, both of them were exhausted but satisfied. They'd built this, not just the cabin or the school, but this entire community of people who looked out for each other. "We did good," Ronan said, looking out at the valley below them. "We did," Clara agreed, "and we'll keep doing good for as long as we can." They stood there together, watching darkness fall over the canyon, and Clara thought about all the women who'd stood on that platform in Black Hollow. She wondered where they were now, if they'd found their own versions of freedom, if they'd managed to build lives that felt like their own. She hoped so. She hoped every single one of them had found a way to be strong, to be free, to choose their own path. Because that's what mattered. Not the circumstances you were born into or the situations you found yourself in, but what you chose to do with them. Clara had chosen strength when the world demanded weakness. She'd chosen love when cynicism would have been easier. She'd chosen to build instead of destroy, to teach instead of retreat, to fight for a future that looked nothing like her past. And standing there in the canyon with Ronan beside her, looking down at the community they'd helped create, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. There were still hard days, still struggles, still moments when the weight of everything felt crushing. But they faced those moments together, as equals, as partners, as two people who'd chosen each other over and over again. That was what love looked like. Not the romantic fantasy sold in storybooks, but the daily choice to show up, to work hard, to support each other through whatever came. It was messy and complicated and sometimes exhausting. It was also the most real thing Clara had ever known. "Ready to go inside?" Ronan asked, breaking her reverie. Clara took one last look at the valley, at the school building standing proud against the darkening sky, at the life they'd built from nothing but determination and hope. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready." They walked into the cabin together, closing the door on the outside world. And in that moment, Clara understood something profound. She'd spent years thinking freedom meant escaping, from poverty, from limitation, from the expectations others placed on her. But real freedom wasn't about escaping. It was about choosing, about looking at all your options and picking the one that made you feel most alive, most yourself, most whole. She'd chosen Ronan, chosen the canyon, chosen this hard, beautiful, meaningful life. And in making those choices, she'd become someone she was proud to be. Not perfect. Never perfect. She still got angry, still struggled, still had days when everything felt like too much. But she was strong now, capable, free in ways that had nothing to do with where she lived and everything to do with who she'd become. And as she and Ronan settled in for the evening, making dinner, talking about the day, planning for tomorrow, Clara felt a peace she'd never known before. The peace that came from knowing exactly who you were and being okay with it. The peace that came from building a life that aligned with your values instead of compromising them for comfort or safety. The peace that came from being truly, deeply loved, not despite your flaws, but because of the whole complicated package you represented. Years would pass. The school would grow. More families would settle in the valley. Clara and Ronan would face new challenges, new struggles, new threats. Nothing was guaranteed. Nothing was forever. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. They had a home. They had a purpose. And they had the knowledge that they'd faced the worst the world could throw at them and survived. Not just survived, but thrived. That was enough. That was everything. And as Clara fell asleep that night, wrapped in Ronan's arms, she thought about the woman she'd been on that platform in Black Hollow. That scared, desperate woman who'd put her name in a bowl and hoped for the best. She wanted to reach back through time and tell that woman, "You're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to be strong and free and loved. You're going to build something that matters, You're going to save yourself, and in saving yourself, you're going to help save others. You're going to survive this, and then you're going to live. Really, truly live. The thought made her smile as sleep claimed her. And in her dreams, she was flying over the canyon, free as the wind, with nothing and no one to hold her down. Free. Finally, completely free.